each of those ending paths has a good version and a bad version of the ending path.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah. Some of the endings are downright ridiculous too. Like one of my favorites is so you remember all those, we didn't talk about it, but there was a point in Heroes where like they find a bunch of shadow androids that Eggman just has.
Oh yeah.
Those come back in Shadow, and there's like this point where Shadow has an existential crisis and like thinks he's an android, and one of the endings is literally Shadow going like, I am Shadow Android, creation of Dr. Eggman. This is who I am. There's that one. My favorite is the one where he karate chops Eggman to death. Like, there's so many goofy fucking endings in this game.
Oh, Jesus.
Hey guys, I'm Bill, a one-time Instagram blogger and now a podcaster.
And I'm Alex, the chaotic neutral.
And together we are the Gaming and Collecting Podcast.
A brother-sister duo.
That talks about gaming.
And also anime.
And don't forget the collecting. Sometimes.
Ah, forget it. We're just a nostalgia podcast at this point.
But anyways, guys, thanks for joining us as we discuss the games that shaped us. So, a little bit different this time, guys. Unfortunately, Alex got sent to Texas by her place of employment, so she is elected to sit this one out for the time being. And we wish her the best. But in the meantime, Thrak is back, and we're going to be continuing on with our Sonic Revisited retrospective. This time, talking about the 3D Sonic games. How you doing, Thrak?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Hanging in there. How's the move going?
It's still in progress. By the time this comes out, it'll probably be complete, and I'll have a full-on podcasting studio all set. But in the meantime, it's finally looking like a house, so that's a good sign.
That's always good. It sucks when it's just a couple of boards on the ground. So
yeah.
Once you eventually build it, you're okay.
And you move in, and everything's just covered in grime because the previous owners never cleaned.
Of course, but that's how you got it so cheap.
Yeah. Well, actually, fun fact: an earlier episode. I actually alluded to a house I visited, and I passed on because it was too disgusting, and they wanted too much money for it. And then hilariously, no one would buy it, so they dropped the price.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, but it's a work in progress. But it's nice having space for all my stuff now, so that's good.
Yeah, you need room for all those 3DO games.
Yeah,
those are some giant boxes.
Yeah, they don't fit on any shelf, which is a pain.
Specifically, like 3DO shells. I think they have like Trip Hawkins' face on them. That's
Wouldn't surprise me. It doesn't help too that 3DO boxes aren't standard and they come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. But this is a discussion for another time. More on that later. So, I think we last left off, we had covered pretty much all of the 2D Sonic games. We kind of here and there mentioned the 3D ones, but I figured 3D Sonic is basically its own nightmare in itself. And honestly, it needs an entire episode just to like do it justice. So
yes,
I guess like Tess, before because we'll probably do this similar to the last one. We'll kind of go like timeline based, like we'll go from where they started to where they ended. But to start it off, I'm actually curious, what was the first 3D Sonic game you played?
It's a good. I think if I'm correct, it was Sonic Adventure 2, because back in the day, in fact, you might remember this, like going into say like the Walmarts or the Targets or whatever, and they would have those like demo kiosks set up for the PS2, the Xbox, and the GameCube, and even the Game Boy Advance. That I remember, I would go over to the GameCube one, and I saw that it had a Sonic game, and I was like, "Oh, Sonic!" because I was familiar with it through my Genesis days. And so playing the City Escape level in Sonic Adventure 2, as a kid, that was mind-blowing, because it was at the same time I had played Super Mario Sunshine, the Wind Waker demo. So, like, this was when, like, 3D games, to me, were, like, this amazing thing, because I grew up on 2D games prior to that. So seeing Sonic Adventure in that way made me very excited. And I never got to play it fully until quite a few years later. I think because I didn't either. I bugged my parents about it and they never got it for me, or I just never, or I forgot about it. I don't really know exactly, but um, and then a couple years later is when the 360 was coming out, when I learned about the debacle that is Sonic 06. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, Sonic Adventure 2 was probably my first experience seeing 3D Sonic, which is quite a way to start. The cityscape level is very iconic.
Totally. Yeah. Unfortunately for me, I was a Sony boy back in the day, so unfortunately the adventure games were elusive to PlayStation fans for a long time. So I had seen like Sonic Heroes, Shadow the Hedgehog. I'd never had a chance to play them. The first one I got to play, I actually mentioned in the previous episode, was Sonic 06. Yay me. Because unfortunately the PS3 had like no games at launch, and I had the choice of MotorStorm, Sonic 06, and Lego Star Wars. And for some reason I decided to play Sonic 06 first. I'm not sure what my thought process there was.
Well, we can get to it when we get to Sonic 06, but I remember seeing the early footage of it, say like the gameplay that was leaked from like Tokyo Game Show, or when people were talking about the demo for it, and they were like, no, this is like really good. Because we found out the demo had less bugs in it than the full game.
Well, I think the demo had less bugs, but it was more unstable.
Yeah, but it was a demo,
means.
so you weren't really gonna. I think most people didn't find that out till later, because from what I gather, people were really hyped about the demo coming out of it, but then when they got the full game, things changed a little bit.
Yeah. No, but we'll save more on that for when we get to 06, because there's actually a lot to unpack before we get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the best place to start is, I guess, the first technical 3D Sonic game, and that would be... So this is where it gets confusing, because do we want to talk about the disastrous development of Sonic Extreme first, or do we want to talk about 3D Blast first?
Well, 3D Blast came out before 06 or Extreme was supposed to come out, right?
So it was being made in tandem with it. It actually came out... So it gets confusing because the Saturn version of 3D Blast was actually released as a replacement for Sonic Extreme.
Yes.
And they were both released on the same day, so that's why I'm always a little confused with that time frame.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel we could talk about Sonic 3D Blast first, and then go into Extreme.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty fair. So, 3D Blast. Quick question: did you play the Genesis or Saturn version first?
I've played both. I think I played the Genesis version first, but in that little period of time, quite a few years ago, I was trying to be a Sega Saturn collector. And even 15 years ago, that was tough. It's much more hard now. The two games I played the most on my Sega Saturn were Sonic 3D Blast and then a game called Power Slave. I don't know if you know about Power Slave.
I know Power Slave.
Yeah, great game.
Amazing Doom style game.
Yeah, I like it more than the original Doom in some aspects. But yeah, I played the Saturn version of 3D Blast a lot. I never beat it because if I remember, that game still does like the live thing, and if you game over, you have to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten pretty far, probably to like the third or fourth world or whatever, and died on the Robotnik boss fight and just noped out of it. And the Genesis version I've played because that's the one they release on compilations all the time.
Oh yeah,
it's the Genesis version, but excuse me, I find it to be inferior. Just because
it's inferior, but also superior in certain elements. Graphically, overall, it's definitely inferior. I think the soundtrack is superior, but that's personal taste.
See, I have a soft spot for that, like mid-90s Sega CD sound. True. You know what I mean? Like that kind of like MIDI sort of vibe. Like Sega handles that really well because the soundtrack to 3D Blast on the Saturn reminds me a lot of the North American soundtrack for Sonic CD. It has sort of that same kind of vibe to it. And yeah, it's like, say with Sonic R as well, like I have a soft spot for that soundtrack. It is so cheesy, but it's fun. Like you can't be sad listening to Can You Feel the Sunshine, you know what I mean? So, but with 3D Blast, it's an interesting idea to do like a 3D Sonic game this early. In fact, I think Sonic 3 was originally going to be completely 3D, but they scrapped that cuz the Genesis really couldn't handle it. And when you
There's
and when you
conflicting rumors on that. Some people say it was Sonic 3 was supposed to be the isometric game. Others say that isometric game was actually one of the many phases of Sonic Extreme. It's never been officially confirmed.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they were considering more 3D capabilities for Sonic 3 during the development. Maybe it was
Mm,
just like an idea they threw out. I mean, you could argue if Blue Sphere is 3D, probably
true.
not, um, but 3D Blast, it's when you think about trying to make a 3D game for Sonic, especially in that time where 3D wasn't really established yet. It's an admirable effort by Traveler's Tales of all companies.
True. This is also actually one of their earliest games as well.
Yeah, like I think most people don't even really know the name Traveler's Tales, and if they do, it's probably for all the Lego games they've been
Yep.
making forever and ever.
And these days, they're more people probably know them as TT games than they do Traveler's Tales.
Yeah, because they really haven't made a non-Lego game since 2008
Yeah,
when they did was it the Prince Caspian Narnia game?
I think
Uh,
so. They also did that god awful Super Monkey Ball Adventure game.
Yeah, I try to like that game, but it's really tough.
I can't get more than 5 minutes in. I just can't figure out what to do.
Yeah, but to their credit, they do have some really good licensed Disney games under their belts.
Hmm.
They did Mickey Mania, which is a great game. Um, they even did that like Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue game,
Yep.
which is really good.
And they also did the first two post Naughty Dog Crash games. Wrath
And
of
those are
Cortex.
okay.
Yep. Twin Sanity is an underrated gem. It's a
Twin
shame.
Sanity is I actually had it on the PS2 back in the day. It was one of the early PS2 games.
Mm.
I hadn't really played a lot of Crash. I never really got in. I've still never really gotten in the Crash, but I've played quite a few of the games. And Twin Sanity is the one I hold the closest, like in terms of like nostalgia to, because it's such a unique concept for a game.
Mm. No,
But
it really is.
but as we're trying to say, like Traveler's Tales, they can make good games, but they can also make kind of iffy games. It's a bit all over the place.
And then they can make really technologically impressive games that just play like shit, like Rascal.
Yeah, or Sonic 3D Blast.
So Sonic, I guess to circle back to Sonic 3D Blast, the best way to explain Sonic 3D Blast is it's essentially an isometric 3D platformer, a platformer in quotation marks. There's not a lot of platforming going on in this game. But essentially the goal of each stage is you have to go from beginning to end and you have to collect a bunch of flickies to progress through every level, which flickies are the little birds that have been in the Sonic series forever.
Yep, I think they made their debut in that god awful flicky game for the Sega Genesis.
Yep, that predates Sonic, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And I guess like the Sonic 3D Blast is interesting because the game itself really isn't bad per se. It's just so boring, like and repetitive. Like
And
anytime I try to play it, it's always kind of like I'll get through two stages and I'll just be like, I'll get to the carnival stage and I'll be like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
yeah, it was definitely admirable in that Traveler's Tales looked at the 2D Sonic games that had preceded it and tried to put that in a 3D world. They didn't take a lot of chances with the art style, which I think is perfectly fine for trying to like figure this out. But I think control wise, it isn't handled really well. Like Sonic is just way too like slippery and feels almost like he's skidding on ice half the time. Even though despite all that, I don't think the game is really that difficult.
It's not difficult. It's just repetitive. And that's kind of, honestly, you're more likely to get bored of it than you are to get stuck from like a challenge.
Yeah. And I've never been the biggest fan of isometric games, like kind of in general.
Yeah.
Because I often get confused by the orientation of it. And with something like Sonic that tends to rely on, say, like platforming and speed and almost kind of precision, jumping. Here, they make it a lot easier overall, but it's still like, especially in some later parts of the game where they want you to make more kind of specific jumps. I found my depth perception was just completely
Yeah.
off,
And
and
sometimes
I
you'll
would just fuck
phase
up
through like
a
a
lot.
platform and stuff. And
Yeah, and then like the Robotnik boss battles, sometimes from memory, it's been a long time since I played the game, but from memory, they would get kind of confusing and almost kind of convoluted in how you were trying to like beat Robotnik. It was trying to have more depth to it, as
yeah,
is the whole thing with 3D games. Especially at that time, they were like, we can't just do the 2D game in 3D. We have to do more.
exactly.
And Sonic falls into that trap as many of his contemporaries did.
So
But
what's
as
kind
we keep
oh,
going,
sorry.
my one hot take is I think Sonic handled the transition to 3D better than a lot of other IPs from that era.
Honestly, like we'll be getting into it. People give Sonic in 3D a lot of crap, but when we get to Adventure, I actually have a lot to say about Sonic's transition because
Yeah.
believe it or not, it's actually there's a lot of misinformed takes about Sonic, let's just say.
No, what?
Yeah,
You're
I know.
kidding me.
Something Game Grumps, something,
But I have a theory as to why a lot of people kind of hate on Sonic these days. But as we get further in,
I
I
think we
have
should
some ideas.
end the episode off with like going over some of these thoughts. I think
Okay,
that'll be a good way to wrap it up.
sure.
So before we finish up on 3D Blast, I actually want to talk about something interesting about this game. There's actually a ROM hack you can play of this game that actually edits out the flicky mechanic. So it's literally all you do is just go like from beginning to end of each stage, and it makes the game so pathetically easy. It's not even funny.
Have you played the director's cut?
The one that John Burden actually made.
Yes.
I did. I honestly didn't see a whole lot of differences, but
I think if you go on, was it Sonic Retro? They give you like the whole list. Um, and a lot of those things seem very minor. My one issue is that it's the Genesis version, which I would
yeah.
have preferred if you would have director's cutted the Saturn version, because I like the Saturn version a lot more than the
Hmm.
Genesis version. I mean, it looks better, it runs better. I think it has a better soundtrack. It adds extra contents, and yeah, it has load times. But I feel like 3D Blast was more meant to be a Saturn game, and I
Yeah.
think
The
if
graphics alone make that version just better.
I agree. And I think if 3D Blast didn't have a Genesis version, if it was just Saturn and it was like the one Saturn Sonic 3D game, quote unquote, maybe would it be hated more, or would it, what would the perception be around this game? Because I think it's kind of just thrown to the side because
It's
it's like, oh, 3D Blast, that one thing.
I think the general opinion of 3D Blast these days is people are just kind of indifferent to it. It exists. No one absolutely hates it
Yeah.
like they used to, but no
It,
one
it
really loves it either.
Not to jump the shark, but or to jump ahead too much. But Sonic 3D Blast reminds me a bit of Sonic Forces, in that both of them are very average, as
Mm.
like middle of the road as you can get, and in that way they almost kind of are the worst because there's nothing horribly like there's nothing grand about how bad they are. They just kind of exist, but they're not really that refined either.
Yeah.
And I think the worst thing a Sonic game could be is forgettable. Because even some of the really bad ones, you don't forget them. They're stuck in people's heads forever.
Yeah.
So for 3D Blast to be the way that it is, it almost puts it like really low on the totem pole. But yeah, for me, it's fine. It's
Yeah.
fine. I can
One
live with it.
one last thing I want to touch on it is the special stages as well, because this game has 3 different special stages depending on the 3 versions of the game.
Yes.
The Genesis version, the special stages are the easiest special stages in Sonic history. You can't lose them unless you try.
Yep.
The Saturn version has quite possibly the greatest Sonic special stage ever made. Depending on your thoughts, like it is the legit one time I actually loved the half pipe in a Sonic game.
That half pipe's okay, but I love me some Blue Sphere from three.
Blue Sphere is
So
probably the best mini game concept, but if I had to rank the half pipes, 3D Blast Saturn has the best half pipe probably ever done because they actually do stuff with it.
yeah, it's a easier to play half pipe than say Sonic 2. So I can give it that.
Yep. Then that music is so catchy.
Yes.
And then the PC version is this weird hybrid of the two, where it's like 2D and it kind of tries to be the half pipe, but it's lame and forgettable, and there's no reason to play the PC version.
Quite the shame.
Which is funny because the PC version uses the Saturn's graphics.
Yeah.
It's
So it looks a lot cleaner, but
it's a weird anomaly of a port.
yeah.
And I guess one final thing, I guess, before we move on from 3D Blast is the composers of the soundtracks. The Genesis version was notably the first game to be directed by Jun Sonoy,
Okay.
who will be a very prominent figure later on. And
Oh yeah.
the Saturn version was composed by another very prominent composer known as Richard Jacques, who also, I guess, to transition to the next game I wanted to talk about, composed the soundtrack to Sonic R.
Oh, he also did Mass Effect.
His discography is actually really massive.
Yeah.
This spoiler warning: this won't be the last time we talk about him in regards to Sonic.
Oh yeah. But he's done some. Oh, he also did the soundtrack for the James Bond Bloodstone game, which I have a bit of a soft spot for. So good stuff.
He's a very prolific Sonic. I mean, not Sonic composer. He's a very prolific composer in video games.
I mean, he's also done a lot of Sonic stuff. So
he has, and we'll be getting to them later.
Oh, yeah.
So Sonic R. This is the most fascinating racing game I think I've ever played, but it's not a good racing game, if that makes sense.
It's the most interesting of Sonic's racing games.
Yeah.
Because it's the only one where Sonic is just running. There's no vehicles, which makes sense in concept. And I think the idea of Sonic as a racing game in this sense could work. But nowadays, with the Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, the Team Sonic Racing, they've figured it out.
Yeah.
Just copy Mario Kart.
Objectively, those are better racing games.
Oh, yeah.
And I do like their excuse for why Sonic's in a car, because he's quote unquote trying to give everyone a fair chance. But
oh, really? That's cute.
Yeah, they put that in the bio for the game, and I was like, okay, at least they acknowledge it. But,
I like that. That's funny. Well, because I always thought the lore was it was Sonic's shoes that made him fast.
They flip flop on this so often, like.
Well, I know the comics have different lore, but I know the comic lore isn't the same as the game lore.
I mean, the game lore kind of changes with every 3 games, so.
True. I'm just going by, I think, the manual of the first game, which says it's the shoes that give him the speed.
Yeah, because Labyrinth also acknowledged that as because he had the slow down shoes in that game.
Yeah, that game is a pain in the ass. But yeah, Sonic R it's weird, yeah, because Sonic R in a way is the Saturn Sonic game. Because I mean, we can get to it with talking with Sonic Extreme, and one of the many issues with the Sega Saturn was their flagship character Sonic didn't have a original game for it, like an original mainline game on the system for it. Which even if that happened, I don't know if Saturn sales would have helped.
No, the Saturn was a lost cause, unfortunately, from the start.
I think the issue with the Saturn was the botched launch and Japan and America divisions not really communicating properly.
Yep.
I mean, to date this video, recently there was that whole 200 plus page document from Sega from 1996 that got leaked. That has a bunch of business documents in it and emails from the time, and it shows a lot of the issues that Sega were having in say 1996, where where they were it's doing so much better than the PlayStation because we go into Japan and there's not a Saturn in sight, but these stores have just stacks of PlayStations, and and the Saturn did well in Japan. But
it is also notably the only Sega console that did well in its home country.
Yeah, that is true. And
almost like it was Sega of Japan's baby or something.
Well, I think they did a better job marketing it and didn't restrict certain games coming to the platform. Because there's a lot of great Japanese-only Saturn titles.
Oh, yeah. The Japanese Saturn commercials are the greatest video game commercials ever.
Oh, yeah. Segata-san Shilo.
Yeah, he beats the shit out of children for not playing the Saturn.
Yeah, he has a giant Saturn on his back. He punches the controller, Like in 1995, 96, could you have shown that on American TV and got away with it? I don't know. Because the
Probably
anime,
not.
well, because like America wasn't such a weeb country like it is now,
Mm,
where you could do that now and people would be all over it. So it's one of those I don't know with the Saturn. Like you don't really know what you could do to fix it. I mean, I think the easiest thing would be just keep the September release date, or maybe bump it to August, but give that the devs enough time to get the games done and ready to go.
yeah.
Because with the super early launch, pissing off retailers, pissing off game developers, pissing off everybody, just like the Saturn, just it didn't have a chance. And even
Also,
if
also
Sonic,
giving Sony quite possibly one of the biggest opportunities to just embarrass them.
well, the whole 299 thing, it seems that way, but there were some other things that went down for why I think the PlayStation did as well as it did.
Oh yeah, totally.
And they did kind of take advantage of Sega and Nintendo kind of like fumbling out the gate.
I mean,
You know?
this has always been kind of Sony's MO though, because I mean, even like looking at like the PS4 launch, they did the same thing, embarrassing Microsoft because of Microsoft's poor decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but ironically, they made some pretty poor decisions with the PS3. So
$599. Yes.
and just having hardware that is still difficult to deal with. But anyways, speaking of hardware that's difficult to deal with, the Sega Saturn, with Sonic R, like Sonic R, I don't think is that bad. I really don't.
It's so as a game itself, the concept is great. Like
Yeah.
the levels are actually really cool and expansive. The problem is the controls are a little sluggish.
Yes.
And the game lacks content. It only has 5 tracks, one of which you have to unlock.
Mm-hmm.
And it's over in like you can beat it in like 30 minutes, probably even less if you're really good at it.
Yeah, but with Sonic R, if you mess up, you're done. Like it's really hard to come back because the handling is just not there. Like it's weird that like racing games, even at that point, like some of them, even by today's standards, control really, really well. But Sonic R is not one of them. And it could have been that the team that was making Sonic R wasn't good with making racing games. I'm not quite sure, but it's clear that there's an idea there, but it just doesn't come together.
Yeah, I will say
kind
though,
of a shame.
Saturn gets a lot of crap for its 3D graphics. Sonic R is a pretty good looking game. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I think the Saturn has quite the aesthetic to it as far as like graphics go, because I'm pretty sure of that gen, it was the most powerful of the three.
N64 was more powerful inherently, but it was severely bottlenecked by the cartridges.
Yeah,
PlayStation was best all around, like in terms of
true
development, like ability, and just overall like what it could do. The Saturn is the weird one because we don't know truly what the Saturn was capable of.
Because I think it's like if you look at the Tomb Raider on Saturn versus the Tomb Raider on PlayStation, it's like Tomb Raider looks better on Saturn. Like the 3D is better, but it runs better on the PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
Like the frame rate is much more solid. Because I think the Saturn was made to be a 2D powerhouse.
It was.
Because Sega thought 3D was a fad.
Ironic that 3D, the whole hype behind 3D was caused by Sega's Virtual Fighter of all things, but
I know, yeah, and Daytona USA.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, then they had to sort of cram 3D capability into the Saturn, and that's kind of what made it a bitch to deal with, and why for a long time it was difficult to emulate properly. But I think we've gotten over that hump. At least in my experience with emulating Saturn games, I haven't really had that much of an issue. But
it's gotten much better.
Yeah,
there's still a few games that are kind of questionable, but it's getting much closer to like everything.
Yeah, if you want to play the near like 6-figure priced game Panzer Dragoon Saga, you can emulate it just fine. So that game is ridiculously priced. I'll never understand why.
I got it for $500.
That's still way too much.
I mean, ironically, I lowballed the guy. He wanted $7,000.
Yeah, there you go.
But
now it's worth what, like $20,000 or some stupid number.
It's like almost, I think it's like $1,200 now or something.
Yeah, it's something ridiculous.
It's quadruple digits. So that's
Sega needs to remake that game. Like give it to Atlas. Have Atlas do it. and I think it would be really cool.
Or even the Yakuza studio or something. Like, they know how to make
Ooh.
RPGs.
Yeah, because that would be a good game to see a more modern like take on. But
yeah.
we're still waiting on the Panzer Dragoon 2 sequel or
Yeah.
remake. So
anyway,
anyway,
going back to Sonic though, we talked about our little underrated game gets too much hate. Before we talk about Sonic, the little bonus feature in Sonic Jam, I wanted to talk about Extreme for a little bit, because Extreme is quite possibly the biggest anomaly in the Sonic series.
Yeah, I think so.
Because have you actually looked into like the full development history behind Extreme and how it had like probably like 7 scrapped builds?
Yeah. There's some really good YouTube videos on it these days. And it just, to me, Sonic Extreme is perfectly emblematic of the issues that Sega had at the time, and sort of the video game industry as a whole had at the time.
Yes.
The whole transitioning to 3D in a way that felt like they were kind of just like forcing it before it was really ready to go. And with the Saturn having its like rough launch, and then because of that, it felt like Sega was trying to push Technical Institute to get Extreme out the door. And yeah, it had all these different concepts, these different ideas. We've seen videos of it. There are some like leaked prototypes you can play technically.
It started out as a 2D game on the Genesis that was based off the Sat AM TV show.
Yeah, and
there
then
was
there was
a
the
weird isometric thing. There was that 32X game that actually looked kind of cool, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I've seen that one. And the big one for the Saturn is it does like the fisheye lens thing, and
that was the initial build, the Chris Sen and Offer Allen build. The one that infamously Point of View butchered the presentation of, and Sega basically, because that game was weird. It had 2 engines. There was the game engine, then there's the boss engine, and the boss engine actually ran good, and the higher ups at Sega were like, make the entire game like that, and the team literally worked themselves almost to death. Like, it was,
yeah, the one guy got sick,
so multiple got sick. Chris Sen almost died, and he had to step away, and then the lead programmer, Christina Coffin, like, she also I guess worked herself like to ammonia, and it had to like stop because she was gonna straight up die if she didn't stop.
Yeah, thankfully that doesn't happen anymore in the video game industry.
Yeah. So something LA Noire or something.
But yeah, Sonic Extreme, it's gone down in legend for it being like such a disaster across the board.
Yeah,
but
disaster is putting it lightly.
Yeah, but if you think about it, had they finished it and got it out the door, would it have been any good?
No, I don't
Probably
think so.
not.
It looked like a pain in the ass to play, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, because like I've played a couple of those like demo prototypes that have circulated on the line. I don't know how official they are or not. And all the ones I've played, I'm like, it's okay. You know, it's nothing insane as far as like good or bad, but
you look at Crash Bandicoot, you look at Mario 64.
Yeah,
I don't think Sonic Extreme was going to be this trendsetter.
Exactly.
Granted, though, I'll give them some credit. We didn't know what 3D games were yet at this point, so they were trying something new.
No, and like, you know, no disrespect to Sega Technical Institute. I think they were a solid dev team for their time, but they're not the team that made Mario 64.
No,
and
they weren't Naughty Dog.
I'm not, or Naughty Dog at the time. Like, I'm not the biggest Mario 64 fan, but I recognize how important that game is for like just gaming as a whole. And that was the game that made everyone go, oh, this is how 3D works. And that Nintendo just in their creative way was able to take the Mario formula and make it work for 3D in a way that made sense. And I think, you know, the people behind the Sonic games, weirdly enough, Sonic Team wasn't making this, despite the fact they had made a game called Nights in the Dreams for the Saturn, which is a great game. And you would have thought that they could have, like, if you say the Sonic Team, okay, now that you've made Nights, make, you know, a 3D Sonic game, you know, maybe in the Nights engine. Like, you have some experience with 3D games, and you made something that's very good. Could you do something with Sonic? But yet, that didn't happen.
Funny you mentioned the Nights engine, because the Sonic Extreme team sure tried to use it.
Yes, and they got in trouble for that.
Yeah, Yuji Naka basically threw a bitch fit and said he was going to quit Sega.
Yeah.
The more we learn about Yuji
They should throw
Naka,
that guy in jail.
yeah, the more we learn about that guy, the more I'm like, this guy was part of Sega's problems. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, I think Yuji Naka was a very talented programmer, but I think
He was like,
being considered like the father of Sonic, it probably went to his head.
yeah, especially
And
considering he was only like 1/3 of the people who created it.
exactly. And even like, I mean, I've heard some stories about Miyamoto over the years, but the general consensus is, that guy has earned his credibility. Whereas I think Yuji Naka's was always kind of on rocky footing.
Yeah. I mean,
Even
Miyamoto makes some questionable decisions, but he's still always 100% behind everything he does.
oh
And
yeah,
his teams all support everything he does. Like there's a reason why like Dinosaur Planet ended up being Star Fox Adventures.
yeah,
because
he'll flip a table on you, man.
because you just listen to what he says, because 9 out of 10 times he's usually right.
Yeah, he has a mind for gaming, and I don't even necessarily think Yuji Naka. I'm not even trying to say Yuji Naka is like a like a facade or anything. Again, I think the guy is a very talented programmer, and he was the guy who made Sonic work in the first place, as far as a game is concerned. But beyond that, it became really difficult. And again, I still don't, to this day, I'm not quite sure why. Like, that was when Sega made a team called Sonic Team, and yet they weren't working on the next Sonic game.
Well, no, because Yuji Naka wanted to make Knights and he wanted to make Burning Rangers. Like,
Yeah.
Also underrated, extremely underrated game that no one's played.
I've played it. That's a fun game.
Oh yeah, it's great 3D on the Saturn.
Yeah, but it's just so weird that Sega never said, okay, in between this, you have to make a Sonic game, or at least help out with the next Sonic game.
Fun fact, they did actually start making a Sonic game for the Saturn.
Is that what became Adventure?
Yes, and the remains of it are hidden in a little game called Sonic Jam.
Ah, Sonic Jam.
Yep. Sonic Jam, we mentioned in the first episode, is like probably the greatest Sonic compilation ever made.
For the time.
For the time, I mean, it's up there with Sonic Origins, probably as the one I'd say is the most worth playing, just for the amount of content that they crammed into it.
I think with Jam, it's what I like is it's such an anomaly that like it's not emulation, it's direct ports.
Oh yeah,
with the normal and easy modes added in there, and then of course the 3D kind of runaround stage, yep. which is neat.
Sonic World, which
Sonic World
also acts as a hub world for all the little bonus features like the art gallery, the history of Sonic, the movie gallery. The movie gallery is awesome because it has all like the cutscenes from CD, like trailers for the Sonic OVA, plus that like obscure Sonic Man of the Year short that never got finished.
Yeah, it is cool. It has a lot of archival content that hasn't been repeated.
And from what I've read, apparently Sonic World is the remains of what was originally the start of Sonic Adventure.
Yeah.
They basically,
and it makes sense.
Oh yeah,
because when you mess around in Sonic World, if you've played Sonic Adventure, it feels similar.
It does.
It has sort of like that rough idea. Attached to it.
See, Sonic World makes me upset that like Sonic Team didn't even attempt to make a Sonic game on the Saturn, because they clearly could have.
Was it just like they had the clout to say no?
I just don't think Yuji Naka wanted to. I think he wanted to do other things, because that's supposedly the reason why it was thrown over to Technical Institute, because apparently when Technical Institute got thrown the new Sonic game, Yuji Naka just infamously looked at what they were working on and basically said, good luck with that. Yeah.
It's so weird, but also like Sonic has always been much more of a big deal in the West. Mm-hmm. So maybe it was like they wanted a Western team to work on it because they would understand it better. I'm not quite sure.
Also, keep in mind, Sonic 2 and 3 were both developed by the Technical Institute.
True, but they did have like,
Yuji Naka was there, obviously.
At that point he was gone. Yeah. Which I don't know if him staying on for Extreme would have helped. Probably not, but
it wouldn't have been Extreme. It probably would have been a completely different game.
Yeah, it would have got released. It would have been Sonic released or something.
Yeah,
but at the very least, I could give Yuji Naka credit for getting a game out the door.
Yes, Because
So
inherently the big problem with Extreme was the fact that like it was splintered between all these little. So there was the main team, and that was split into two sub teams working on the two engines, and then the sub teams were splintered off into different teams, and they were all just working on random shit. No one was directing anything.
yeah, it clearly had ambition, but
Yeah, I
it
think the
was
problem
just
was
didn't work.
Chris Sen was not meant to be a director. Like he flat out wasn't even supposed to be the game's director. He just kind of got the project thrown on him, and he did his best.
Yeah,
But
which is quite the shame. I mean, I think had Sonic Extreme come out, it probably would have moved a couple Saturns because some people have been like, "Oh, the new Sonic game, I'll get a Saturn now."
yeah, I don't think
But
it would have saved the Saturn, but it definitely would have
no,
done something.
no, it's funny we say save the Saturn when you look in like Japan, it sold better than the N64 did.
Yeah.
So
The funny part, honestly, to wrap up the Saturn portion though, like just the set, you knew the Saturn was dead when Bernie Stoller flat out came out and said the Saturn is not our future.
yeah, it was like 2 years after.
Yep. Right
Yeah.
after he was fired from Sony for doing stupid shit.
Yeah.
Bernie Stoller, I have a mixed thoughts on because he did a lot of very genius things, but he was also he made a lot of really stupid decisions.
I'll give him credit, and that is when it comes to the Dreamcast, he was all behind it.
He was.
He when he said like Saturn isn't our future and like let the Saturn go, he was like we're all in on Dreamcast, and he did a really good job pushing the Dreamcast as like this is going to be the big thing.
All right. So continuing on, so Sonic Adventure.
Sonic Adventure.
The probably, I'm not gonna lie, one of probably the most ambitious and best launch games I could think of for a console.
I would say it's one of the most important Sonic games.
It is because it introduced a lot of tropes to the series that like would become mainstays. Like it introduced the modern Sonic design. It was the introduction of Crush 40 doing the Sonic music. It was the introduction of Sonic in 3D and voice acting and all sorts of things.
Yeah, and it's so weird to think that it was only 4 years after Sonic and Knuckles.
It was like 1998, 99 in North America.
Yeah. So like even though it was only 5 years, 5 years back then had much more of an impact than say like 5 years now. So I think that's why when people were like, "Oh, like where's the next, Sonic game, whatever," people were just like clamoring for it. So it felt like this took a long time to get where it is now. But yet in reality it was only like 5 years.
Yeah, it was interesting, and also like the the stylistic shift between Sonic and Knuckles going into like Extreme. It was very much clearly this is kind of like I mean not Extreme, Adventure was very much this is a new Sonic for like a new generation of gaming.
He's redesigned.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And
he's got the green eyes. He's got the more like noodly kind of arms.
longer spikes.
Yeah,
Basically, he looked 90s as fuck.
Oh yeah, at the tail end, like he was
Yep.
perfect for going into like the 2000s. And yeah, Sonic Adventure, it was a big deal. They portrayed it as a big deal. It was the launch game for the Saturn or for the Dreamcast, and yeah, made a big splash at the time. And this is where I say like Sonic handled the transition to 3D better than some other IPs.
Oh yeah.
Because Sonic Adventure, for like the first official 3D outing at the time, it is pretty solid. Like it's, some people may hate me for saying this, but I think it's comparable to Mario 64 as like this is introducing this beloved character into a new realm. Completely different games, completely different. But I think Adventure for the time was very good. I don't think it's aged the best.
No.
But for 1998, 1999 on your brand new, shiny Dreamcast with its 56K modem and the VMUs and everything.
128 bits.
Hell yeah.
Which was complete bullshit, by the way, but
numerical progression.
Yeah.
But it was perfect. It was how you establish a new system. And, this, to me, this was like showing that like Sega meant business with the Dreamcast. They could not fuck up the Dreamcast they kind of did, but they were trying their best not to.
I'll kind of interject there. I don't think they fucked up the Dreamcast. I just think they were so in the toilet that no matter what they did, it was going to fail.
That I would agree with. Like it would, like the Dreamcast, everything was set up for it. You know, it came
That
in.
was
They
that
came
was.
in
Oh,
in a
sorry.
like it came in like at that weird point, like between generations. It had a really good price point. It had a lot of software out the gate. Had good third party support for a Sega console, and or at least by that point,
Mhm.
and was very well built. Easy to make games for it.
Oh,
You
it was
know
a
the
snap to make games for
yeah
it, famously.
yeah those GD ROMs and everything, and like having 56K modem out of the box was a big feature at the time, being like
Mm,
the first plug and play online console. It wasn't the first console to go online, but it was the first you could just do it
yes.
like right out the box. And yeah, they were trying so hard to get the Dreamcast to be a success. And I'd say by some token it was a
It
success.
was. It was like the fastest selling console at launch when it came out.
Yeah, but it wasn't enough.
No.
And that the a lot of people like to blame the PS2. I don't really blame the PS2 because like I think Nintendo and even newcomers Microsoft were able to withstand the PS2 and be just fine. So I don't think that was really the issue. I
No,
just think
the problem was
as you had said was just Sega was just in such a dire straits at that point. There was nothing that could really keep it going.
yeah.
It was almost a lost cause, which to me is such a shame because I often wonder what the video game industry would look like if there were four console manufacturers. If it was Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sega.
Well, Sega and Microsoft were very close because the Dreamcast had some support for Windows on it.
Yep. A
Um,
Windows CE, I think.
so CE is supposedly just kind of like this made up operating system that was just designed to go with the Dreamcast. From what I've heard, it doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah.
But Microsoft was very into the Dreamcast at the time, and they were actually proposing some sort of connectivity between the Dreamcast and the Xbox at one point before the Dreamcast failed.
Yeah, I think, and also I think after that, didn't Sega say to Microsoft like, "Hey, you should put Dreamcast backwards compatibility in the original Xbox,"
They thought about
which
it.
to me sounds like crossbreeding and is forbidden.
Well, keep in mind too, I like to jokingly call the Xbox the Dreamcast 2 because
A lot of people do.
almost every Sega IP, like when Sega divvied all their IPs between like the consoles, like almost all of the unique ones went to Xbox.
Yeah, because with Nintendo, it felt like, I think at that point, like Nintendo and Sega were like friendly competitors at that point. Like this is past like the 16-bit era where they were like at each other's throats,
Mm.
and I think Sega sort of embraced the idea of us on a Nintendo console. Isn't that cute?
Well, they had already put Sonic on a rival's system, anyways, because they put Sonic on the Neo Geo.
Yeah, but that's a whole different beast entirely. But I know that like Sega, it took them a while to really embrace Sony because I think
Yeah,
they looked at Sony with a lot of disdain,
we'll get
thinking
to
it was
we'll get to Heroes, but
yeah
yeah, we'll see. Talk about how that went.
yeah exactly.
And I guess one final thing to talk about the Microsoft and Sega closeness was the final CEO of Sega of America before the Dreamcast failed was a man named Peter Moore, and Peter Moore later went on to be the CEO of Microsoft,
Yeah.
the games division, anyways.
And also with this recent Microsoft FTC hearing, Microsoft had like I think they'd like given the list of companies they've like considered buying, and one of them was Sega. But I think Microsoft buying Sega has been a rumor for like 20 years.
It's been a rumor, but I think that's too big a company to buy because
It's one of those that like I mean, people would have said that about Activision. Like, I don't think Sega is out of the realm of possibility if Xbox were to buy them. The only issue I see with it is the cross country, the sort of the international sort of thing. Because I know in Japan they're a little bit more strict on having like American companies just coming in and buying everything.
yeah,
So
that
I
and
think that would
also
be the problem.
Microsoft is already in hot water as it is for trying to buy it. Well, have they bought it yet, or are they still fighting it?
Well, at this current date, which is the 10th of July. We are still waiting on if the judge is going to grant the injunction that the FTC wants on the Microsoft Activision merger. Which, if they get the injunction, that probably means Microsoft will back out of the deal. They'll pay the $3 billion to Activision and just go away.
Yeah.
But if the judge denies it, then most likely Microsoft is going to just force it through and be like, nope, it's done. Like, screw the CMA. We're just going to close it.
See, the thing is, if they do end up getting Activision, which I bet they will, I'm at the point where I'm just...
I think so, because the FTC's case was so bad.
Yeah.
It was so like poorly thought out, and the judge was like clearly irritated the whole time, because all the FTC's argument really was, oh, but what about PlayStation? That's like all they were arguing. And the judge was trying to be like, oh, well, why can't PlayStation, compete? Or, they're trying to make other sort of arguments, and the FTC would just get mad.
The joke, the irony is too, PlayStation can't compete because they're currently beating Microsoft.
It's a whole mess, and it's like, we don't need to deviate that much. But it's like, I'm pretty sure Call of Duty will stay on PlayStation if Microsoft buys them. Call of Duty will probably stay on PlayStation for the foreseeable future. I don't see why it wouldn't. I really don't.
Yeah, are they going to really give up free money?
Exactly. It's money that's going to go to them. So I don't really care. Like, hey, if they buy Activision and they get like Toys for Bob to make a Banjo-Kazooie game, then we'll be fine. Then everyone will be like, this was worth it. So,
but they have to make Call of Duty.
Microsoft would probably let them do whatever they want.
I know. I just joke about how every time Activision has a good studio that actually makes quality games, they get thrown on Call of Duty for eternity.
Or Vicarious Visions that got integrated into Blizzard.
Yeah.
That one breaks my heart.
Yeah,
I love Vicarious Visions.
Or Neversoft, they're now part of Infinity Ward or all this.
Well, Neversoft that's a whole different thing. So they were making the Tony Hawk games, then they went all in on Guitar Hero, and then that crashed. So what were they going to do after that? Who knows? But
yeah.
But anyways, back to Sega.
My point was saying, like, if Microsoft tried to buy Sega, I'm pretty sure the freaking FCC would have a freaking meltdown because,
Well, and also it would be more of like whatever Japan's like trade commission is.
Yeah.
Because that would probably be a whole mess. But I don't think that'll happen. I mean, I've even heard like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if Microsoft bought Square? Which I think would, honestly, I would only like to see that just to see like people flip their lid, because people would get like upset, and I would think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
But just for the chaos of like, oh, Microsoft owns Final Fantasy. Like, oh, we can't get Final Fantasy. We're just going to buy you, Square, which would be hilarious. But
yeah,
just for the comedy, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't even see Sony buying them. Like, no. I think Square's fine being a third party.
Square's too big, honestly.
Not even that. It's just they make deals with all three of them.
Yeah, they do.
Like, they make deals with Sony, they make deals with Microsoft, Nintendo. Like, why would they want to close that off? Because if Sony bought them, they would just be Sony forever, and they would probably lose revenue overall. Yeah. Microsoft would probably let them to a point. Nintendo would. I mean, Nintendo doesn't buy anybody. They don't even own like companies developers that we assume are theirs, like Intelligent Systems. They don't own them. We just assume they do.
I thought they did own Intelligent Systems.
They do not. They do not. They officially do not. They're considered not a subsidiary, but like a partner.
I thought they were founded by Nintendo.
No. They just, like, they could make stuff for other companies. They just don't. They're considered a major affiliate. The same way, like, Camelot and Game Freak and Grezzo and all these other companies. That's like, they're not technically owned by them. They're technically their own company.
Interesting.
I know, right? But I think that's just how Nintendo is.
So I guess back to Adventure, because that's where we were before we went on this tangent.
This will all be edited out.
No, I'll leave it in. I don't edit on GNC. Unless I have to, but that's besides the point.
But yeah, Sonic Adventure it's not that bad. I really don't think it's that bad.
Oh, the game itself is great. It just hasn't. The stuff around it hasn't aged well over the years.
Yes,
unfortunately.
The voice acting is awful. but in a so
It's
bad it's good kind of way.
it's awful in the sense that like because of what modern voice acting standards are, you look at it and go, yeah, this is bad. But nostalgically, I love Ryan Drummond as Sonic. Like I can still quote the opening scene, like the classic, like,
Watch
"Oh
out, you're gonna
yeah, yeah,
crash. Ah,
oh yeah, this is happening," as he's
yeah.
moving around like a freaking Muppet over
I
there.
I'd heard some stuff about Ryan Drummond the other day.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was like, I don't want to see this anymore. I'm gonna pretend I didn't.
You know what I'm talking about, then, don't you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Keep a distance from your fans, everybody. I'll
Yeah,
just say that. Um,
like just to put it into perspective, like Roger Craig Smith, significantly better actor.
yeah, but like his Sonic, it just sounds weird to me. I'm not used to it yet.
I mean, they've tried to fire him 4 times and they can't get rid of him. So,
I like Roger Craig Smith. I think he's great,
no,
but
he's a great actor.
yeah, just him as Sonic is weird. But
It's grown on me over the years. I'm not gonna lie. They fired Griffith when he got good. So,
mhm.
but
Yeah, Sonic Adventures. Yeah, it's voice acting. It almost gives me like a '90s anime dub vibe.
yeah,
You know?
it's so cheesy.
Yeah.
One fun thing about this game's dubbing though that I like is for whatever reason, like they decided to make every story like from the point of view of the character you're playing as. So the story actually is written differently
Yep.
depending on who you're playing as, which is a nice touch, even though it makes no sense in terms of continuity.
When has Sonic ever cared about continuity? Let's be honest.
That's
Here.
fair. I also give this game credit because almost all. So one thing that 3D Sonic games got horribly crapped on over the years for was the alternative playstyles were always so crappy and shoehorned in. I'll give this
Yes.
game credit. Only one of them I actively dislike.
Is it big?
Yeah, I mean nothing against Big himself, but his gameplay is boring.
I mean, the fact that Big exists is like proof that God doesn't exist. But
I mean he's voiced by Duke Nukem.
you Froggy,
The best
Froggy.
ironically the best voice actor in this game probably.
John St. John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That guy's a legend.
Come here, Froggy.
But like the Sonic level gameplay is great. Like I give this game so much credit because like they actually tried to incorporate physics from the classics into this. Like if you roll into a ball, you actually roll down cliffs.
Yeah.
The loops are automated, but I mean, let's face it, if you actually go into the tech demos to like test around like with their like test levels, the loops weren't automated in those and they don't work for shit. So
Yeah. I've seen those videos. They're pretty rough.
so like I give the automated loops like a pass. It's like whatever. They work for what they are. But
I
like
mean, a lot of Sonic is a spectacle anyway. Like even the
yeah.
2D games, a lot of it is you do a thing and then Sonic goes wacky and you just go, "Oh, cool." You know, the 3D games are more obvious in their quote unquote automation, but the 2Ds have it a little bit.
But like something I love about like Adventures gameplay is like you can like actually take shortcuts in the levels with how they're designed. Like if you position the spin dash just right, you can like launch like up to portions of the level like earlier and like you can do all sorts of wacky like speedrunning tactics. Like stuff that just isn't possible in the later games because of the way the physics work.
Yeah.
The problem is the trade-off is that's one of the reasons why Adventure is such a glitchy, poorly aged game is this game is very unstable in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
In some ways. My experience with it, I've never had too many glitch problems. Like I tend to get lucky when it comes to like glitches. They never happen to me that often. But yeah, Adventure does have that. The version I own, I used to own it on the Dreamcast because I swear I still have a Dreamcast somewhere, but I don't know where it is. But I had a copy of Adventure and I played it on there a lot. And then I have the GameCube version, the Adventure DX, and that's the version I own now. And if I were to play it again, it would be that version.
So it's ironic that the least glitchy version of Adventure is actually the Dreamcast version. Because Adventure suffers from one of the weirdest porting chains I've ever seen, where the most recent version of Sonic Adventure that you can get on like say PSN or Xbox Live, it is a port of a port of a port of a port. Like
Yeah.
it is the wildest like thing, and that's why the current version is such an unstable mess. And a lot of that has to do with just like I think like Ironically, I don't think porting from Dreamcast to GameCube was as easy as people gave it credit for.
No, probably not.
Because it's weird how like DX both looks better but also worse at the same time in a lot of ways.
Yeah, because like the GameCube is more powerful than the Dreamcast, like pretty significantly. But just because a console is more powerful than another one doesn't mean it's going to be, a one-to-one transition.
Oh yeah.
And
Like
I don't even think the GameCube is necessarily hard to make games on. At least I've never heard, one way or the other on it. But still, like going from one system architecture to another back then was challenging. It's not like today where the PS5 and the Series X are essentially both running on like
PCs.
AMD chips.
Yeah.
Yeah, that are just like they're slightly different, but not different enough.
Yeah, it's not like the PlayStation, Saturn, N64 era where those are all three legitimately different machines.
Yeah. Or the cell processor of the PS3
Yeah.
compared to what the 360 had, which were both very different.
Yes. But going back into the playstyles though, like so Sonic had his traditional Sonic style platforming stages. Tails had these cool like race stages, which were basically just kind of like they were just shorter versions of the levels that you basically had to speed run.
Yeah.
And Sonic says hey 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 a lot. It's fun.
Yeah, those are okay.
They were fun. The Knuckles levels I actually enjoy because the radar isn't stupid like it will be in Adventure 2.
I like them more in Adventure 2, but we'll get to that.
So I'll my thing I'll give is like the radar in Adventure 1 I think was better designed because it will pick up on any Emerald Shard as opposed to just the one that you have to find, and the levels aren't too big.
Yeah.
Then I just kind of I enjoy Knuckles' controls in Adventure because like he has like all that wacky shit he just like gets thrown on him as the game goes on. I mean, granted, he gets a lot of wacky shit in Adventure 2 as well, though. All right, never mind. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I like the radar. I think that's my reason for liking the Knuckles stages. Amy's levels are okay. They're just kind of slower paced, platform heavy levels where you have to dodge a robot for a lot of them.
Yeah, never been a big fan of Amy stages.
Nah, they're not offensive, but they're not the best.
Yeah.
And then Big is literally Sega Bass Fishing.
But not as good.
No, not at all.
Sega's Bass Fishing is legitimately amazing.
It is. And then Gammas are rail shooter levels, which are pretty fun. They're time-based. They're quick. No complaints with them whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, the game feels like it's overloaded with content in some instances. Because I think most people, when they pick up like a Sonic game, they just want to play a Sonic. But as you've mentioned, when we hit the 3D games, you're never just Sonic for the most part. You have to play as like all these other characters with all these different ideas, which feels like they're trying to make it's that idea of like, oh, it's a 3D game. It has to be more.
Yeah.
And sometimes it feels completely unnecessary. And Sonic would kind of go in and out of doing the multiple characters, multiple ideas, but here, I think because it's the first one and they're still kind of figuring it out and it's still a bit of an anomaly, I'll give it a pass.
Yeah. And other than Big, none of them are drastically different.
Yeah. And they're perfectly playable.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I can imagine playing this game in 1998, 1999, being like, yeah, this is that hot shit. This is that good stuff.
No, totally.
But playing it nowadays,
I don't replay Big Story very often. I will say that.
Who would?
Let's players.
Good for them.
So before we move on to Adventure 2, I also wanted to bring up this game was the introduction of Crush 40 into the Sonic series. What are your thoughts on Crush 40?
They're the best. I love them.
Yep. Good old Jun Sonoy and Johnny Gioeli.
It's so crazy how the Sonic series, there's that really good YouTube video about the music of Sonic where it like goes through all the different eras and all the different styles, and it's so crazy to think there's been like different ideas for Sonic music throughout the years, like the Genesis 16-bit stuff, the Crush 40 like heavy rock era, and then this like modern day that tries to be a little bit more orchestral, and then all these other little bits in between, and yet it's like the most consistent thing about Sonic is the music.
Yep.
It's almost always fantastic. And Crush 40, yes, it's edgy butt rock, but for some reason, because it's Sonic, it works.
Also, like, you take into account too, like, you get the so Jun Senoi loves 80s hair metal. Like, he clearly
Really? I wouldn't have guessed.
yeah. I mean, because Johnny Gioeli, for those who don't know, came from a band called Hardline, which was a 80s hair metal band that came out in the 90s, and that's why they failed, because grunge had already happened by that point. He's also the lead singer of a German metal band called Axel Rudy Pell. Cool stuff. No one really talks about it though because it's obscure. But he's most famous over here for being the lead vocalist of Crush 40, and they do some wacky stuff with that. But also in this game, we also have Tony Harnell singing the theme of Sonic with It Doesn't Matter. And Tony Harnell is the lead singer of the 80s hair metal band TNT. And then we also
Everybody's
had
favorite.
10,000 Lovers in One. I mean, and then Big's theme was sung by Ted Poley, who was the lead singer of the 80s hair metal band Danger Danger, who wrote the song Naughty Naughty.
Yeah, that very famous band with that very famous song.
Danger Danger's later albums are actually pretty good, but like the one that they're most known for is probably their weakest.
Yeah.
Ironically, all these bands were bigger in Japan because Japan is like behind on the music scene.
Yeah, there's something about that, I guess. I'm not quite sure. But
well, I mean, for Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition, he got Eric Martin from Mr. Big to do like vocal tracks on that album. So,
well, Mr. Big is that's what they're known for, is being big in Japan.
Yeah, like one hit
Big
wonder
song.
in America. One hit wonder in America. Mega superstars in Japan can fill out Budokai whenever they want.
And I don't even like that song.
No, it's arguably one of their weakest songs.
Yeah, but like I'm not a Mr. Big guy anyway. Like I don't know. I listen to him and I'm just like I'm bored.
Eric Martin was also the guy that sang the Power Rangers theme in the movie.
It's not as good as the TV movie. It's not as good as the TV theme.
Well, Ron Wasserman just has a very iconic voice.
Well, just that whole track is perfect, man.
Yeah,
like that. Like I like knowing that was probably the first time you ever got hyped as a kid, was when you hear that and you're like, oh shit, you know. And then you watch the show and you're just like, this is kind of whatever.
Yeah. But anyways, so moving on now, Sonic Adventure 2.
The better of the adventure games.
The better to a degree, I'd say.
I think it handles the whole having different characters and different play styles better. It feels much more refined, and they're trying to like learn some lessons from the first adventure game, not being as bloated and having those moments where in Sonic Adventure 1 where you're just kind of roaming around going like, oh, what do I do next? Here it's just level based. Like, all right, you did this level, go to the next level, which I think for Sonic is works very, very well. And yes, this game hasn't aged the best either, but I think it's aged better than Sonic Adventure 1. And I think when people think about like 3D Sonic, this is one of the games they think of. This is one of the iconic Sonic games in the series.
Because this was the first one that was released on a Nintendo console, 3D Sonic game, that is, not counting Advance.
Yeah. And it did come out on the Dreamcast first. Like the tail end. It was like that's the thing. It's like the swan song for Sega in a way.
Well, it's funny because the differences between Adventure and Adventure DX are pretty noticeable. Like graphically, like DX changed a lot of things. The differences between Adventure 2 and Adventure 2 Battle aren't nearly as noticeable.
Yeah, it like that feels more like a port, whereas I think Adventure DX is almost like a remaster.
It's an update, definitely. Like they changed the models out and smoothed out a few things, made it glitchier somehow. Adventure 2 Battle, though, is basically a solid port.
Yeah,
that gave you the multiplayer stuff from the start.
Yeah, and it introduced the world to everybody's favorite edgelord, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Voiced by David Humphries. I fucking love David Humphries' like performance, even though it's cheesy as fuck.
It's so crazy how Shadow, like the perception of Shadow over the years, you know?
Well,
Because
in Adventure 2, he was such a great character, and I'm on the side that wishes he stayed dead at the end.
yeah, like him becoming a mainstay character probably wasn't the best idea. But I almost get the idea the idea that they were thinking, oh, Shadow could be like another Knuckles type character,
Mm.
where he starts out as a villain, but then maybe over time he becomes like a neutral, friendly to Sonic, the way kind of Knuckles is.
Well, I always used to joke saying, like, because Sonic and Dragon Ball always seem to parallel for whatever reason. I used to always joke saying Knuckles was like the Vegeta, and then they turned Knuckles into more of the Piccolo because they made an actual Vegeta later on.
Yeah, like Shadow is very much Vegeta, um, just nowhere near as interesting.
Yeah, he's
Um,
he's a more edgy Vegeta, if that's
yeah,
possible.
and if you gave him like Heelys as well.
You could buy Shadow's shoes at one point.
Yes,
The
yes,
soap shoes, because this game has actual sponsorship.
I love it.
I will say though, like everyone, even the detractors of this game, everyone has to admit though, City Escape has to be one of the greatest opening levels of all time.
City Escape for 3D Sonic is what Green Hill Zone is to 2D Sonic.
Totally.
It's like the iconic intro that is just, it's perfectly paced out. The music, the level design, everything works.
One of the
And I
greatest
remember
songs of all time. Like
Live and
Escape,
Learn. Live and Learn.
Live and Learn, Escape from the City, featuring Tony Harnell and Ted Poley.
Yeah, because when I played Sonic Adventure 2 in the demo kiosk, it was City Escape. And I loved it because I'm like, this is awesome.
No, it really is.
And even still to this day, like you fire up Adventure 2, you go, Team Sonic, and then you start playing it, and you just feel like you feel like you're back in 2001. You're transported back to that time. And even if it's corny as hell and a bit cringy, it's done with so much like heart,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's not half-assing it at all.
One of
It
the
just
few Sonic games where you get to play as Robotnik as well.
Yeah, and yeah, just that City Escape level is just it's perfect.
100%.
It's in a way that mirrors Sonic 1. Everything that comes after doesn't hold up.
And the funniest part though is like you could some people might not have actually got City Escape first, because if you pick Team Dark, you don't get City Escape. You get the highway level instead.
Yeah, with Shadow, which is fine.
Also a good level. Great music, but nowhere near as iconic.
Yeah, because the Sonic and Shadow levels in 2 are like some of the best, I think, 3D Sonic overall.
So this is how I always put it. Like the Sonic and Shadow levels, I think are a step above like the Sonic levels from Adventure. Knuckles, the Knuckles and Rouge levels, I'm not a fan of just because they're too big in my opinion.
I could see that,
and they just take forever. But I love the rap music, so that kind of makes up for it.
Yeah, that Pumpkin Patch rap or whatever it is. That's fantastic.
I'm getting down in Pumpkin Hill or some shit like that.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know. The Knuckles and Rouge levels in 2 didn't bug me as much as they did in 1. I honestly don't know why. But the Tails and Eggman stuff, that feels like the weakest part for me.
So what's funny to me is like the Eggman levels don't bother me in the slightest. The Tails levels, I'm like, why is Tails in a mech?
I mean, Tails has always been like the smart one who builds stuff, because he built the tornado and everything. But
I always thought it would have made more sense if they. I mean, this probably would have been really boring in hindsight, but I feel like it would have made more sense if they made Tails' levels like the tornado or something, like the flying levels or something.
Yeah, give him like a Rogue Squadron type thing where he just like shoots other things down with his tornado.
In the beta for this game, originally it was only 4 playable characters.
Oh, what? Just Sonic, Knuckles, Shadow, and Rouge?
No, it was Sonic, Shadow, Knuckles, and Eggman. Rouge and Tails were added later.
I wonder why they added Rouge.
Probably just to have an equal counterpart on both sides.
And then maybe some other thing. Maybe because it feels like Adventure 2 is where, maybe unintentionally, Sega was kind of tapping into that furry market a little bit.
Possibly.
And I mean, Rouge, you see the character model for Rouge, and you're just like,
yeah,
what are you doing? What what are you doing? This is like a Lola Bunny situation.
Yeah.
It's a little sus.
Her character model is fucking weird in Adventure, though. Like, it doesn't make any
Yes.
sense aesthetically.
It's so bad, but it's like that's the iconic Rouge. Like they've refined it over the years, and she makes more sense now. But it's like that's not how you remember Rouge.
Also, fun fact about Rouge, she actually has probably the most highly prolific voice talent in the entire in the pre 4Kids voice actors.
Oh, really?
Because she was voiced by Lonnie Manila.
I don't know who that is.
So she's in pretty much everything. Like her most well known role is she's the American voice of Luke Treaton in Professor Layton.
Oh.
She was also Bubsy in Bubsy 3D, believe it or not. She's been in a lot of stuff. Like if you look up her list of voice roles, like it's a surprisingly impressive amount of roles. But those are the ones that I remember.
Oh, she was all the voices in a stall.
Yes, yep.
A great Sega Saturn game. She has been Sonic stuff. She's in Persona 2.
Yep.
Some Frogger stuff. Go Hypergrind. Ooh, Devil May Cry 3. Oh, she's Ivy in Soul Calibur.
Yep.
It all makes sense now.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's Luke in the Professor Layton series, a series I love dearly.
Only in the American games though. She was the European games had a different actress.
Good thing I played the American ones.
Unfortunately, the crossover only uses the European tracks though. So
yeah. Oh, she did a bunch of voices in Skyrim. Though I feel like everybody did a voice in Skyrim. I'm pretty sure my voice is in there somewhere.
Yeah. Other than that, though, most of the voice actors were the same. Although Knuckles was replaced with Scott Dreer, who I think is actually my favorite Knuckles voice. Maybe. I don't really like Dan Green, so that's probably why I don't like. He's probably my favorite.
I'll be honest, I cannot tell you the difference in voices.
No,
it's never something I really worried that much about. I know what they sound like, and we just kind of go from there, you know.
There was a big point where I was really into the Sonic like voice actors for whatever reason. Probably because that was like when they were switching from 4Kids to the current actors.
Yeah, and they definitely like try to make it like a big deal. They're like, oh, you know, we have new voice actors for Sonic, you know, whereas like Mario's had the same voice forever.
It also doesn't help too that everyone complained about the 4Kids actors for years.
Oh, for Sonic X.
Sonic X up until when they fired them after Black Knight.
Gotcha.
But yeah, Adventure 2, this game definitely has, I think, I won't say the story's good because the story is a fucking mess when you actually think about it.
I mean, does any Sonic game have a really good story? Especially when we hit the 3D ones. I mean, I know I went on about how I love the storytelling in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and how it's all, you know, very visual based and does a good job of explaining everything with no excessive dialogue. But once we get to like the 3D games, it's like they get a little overboard, and you more remember them for like the wacky bits rather than like the totality of like, oh, that writing is really good.
Colors was okay. that's about it.
Well, Colors is fun. Colors is lighthearted, and it works with what it's trying to do.
See, Adventure 2 is a decent story, but it just has so many, like, when you actually tear it apart, you're like, this is stupid in so many levels.
Yeah, it's like an anime where it feels like the writing of it, they're not, at least back then, they weren't thinking too deep or too hard about continuity or making it all fit. They just thought people would just enjoy the process.
I love how they tried to make it cinematic in Adventure 2, though. Like, when you finish a storyline, you get that really awesome, like, continue the story in Team Dark Story, and it like does like this whole thing. The funniest part is, though, they changed that ending depending on who you played first, and because the majority of people played Team Sonic first, they didn't get the ending for Team Dark if you play Team Dark first. And that one has like one of my favorite quotes ever, where it's like Sonic the Hedgehog has been arrested. Goodbye, Sonic, forever. or some shit like that. It's like one of the most edgelord things ever, but it's so fucking funny.
Yeah, they missed out on the part where Sonic and Shadow argue about the pronunciation of GIF.
Yeah.
It's
Also, like,
pronounced GIF.
also, this is the game where like the voices all like talk over each other all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
it's a beautiful mess.
It's great. Like Jun Sonoy, great composer, horrible sound mixer. I've never understood his.
Oh, yeah. But I think a lot of butt rock guys have never really been great with sound mixing, at least
No.
in my experience of listening to that stuff. Like, it's like it doesn't have to be Steely Dan here, but like, you know, you can adjust some levels here. It doesn't have to be so in your face all the time.
Yeah. And I will say though, like we mentioned it earlier, Live and Learn, greatest final boss theme probably in Sonic history.
It's up there, man. It's pretty good.
It's debatable. It's not my favorite Crush 40 song, but it's in the top 5 by far.
Yeah.
Like,
It's pretty good.
It's just such a rockin' song. But yeah, so this game iconically ended with Shadow dying, supposedly.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really good ending to this game.
So do you think Shadow's existence is actually just a fever dream in Sonic's head?
Knowing the series, it's possible.
Yeah. He can never like Shadow just forever follows him like a shadow.
Yeah. I guess to move along though, because I don't want to. I want to get to the later ones. We should probably move on to Sonic Heroes.
See, that's my favorite Crush 40 song. Is the Sonic Heroes theme.
It's so cheesy but great at this.
Sonic Heroes. It's so good, man.
Like what goes up must come down.
Love that
Let
shit.
the piece go shut the ground. I just love it because Johnny Giuelli saying that with a smile on his face.
Yeah, like I think what makes Crush 40 work is that it is like the butt rock aesthetic, but they're not pretentious at all. Like all the butt rock guys are incredibly pretentious, and that they're like, oh, like I'm doing like real art, and this is like, oh, like my heart spills out onto the page, or you know, whatever the fuck like those guys say. But Crush 40, it's just like, no, it's music for a fucking blue hedgehog. Like we know what we're doing. We're not overthinking it.
And then this game also was famous for it gave an alternate final boss theme by Crush 40, which was What I'm Made Of, which is equally epic.
That is good. Yeah.
But I guess going into Heroes, this game is interesting.
It's almost good. Almost.
Everything about it to me is great, just not the execution.
Yeah. The whole having the 3 different characters as like a team is fun. I think the level design is pretty solid throughout the whole game. It goes back to a more kind of linear style, which I think was the way to go.
It is a very classic feeling game.
Yes, and I think that was smart.
So
the only issue I really have with this game is that if you want like, you know, the good ending, you have to beat the game 4 times.
Yeah. So
which I think was a horrible idea.
Yes. So my thing with this game is everybody makes like the freaking joke about like oh my god, it has 12 playable characters. This is ridiculous. In reality, it has 1 playable character because all of them play the same basically. Like,
I mean, you can make an argument for 3.
Well, I mean, there's one play style where like you play as 3 characters and they all have their own style, but it's like all 4 stories are basically the same in terms of how they play. Yeah, like the characters have different kind of move sets, but for the most part, they all play the same.
Yeah, and like the Chaotix team, it's like they have those extra objectives.
Yes,
which I felt was like, why did you do that? That felt kind of pointless to me.
Also, bringing the Chaotix back out of nowhere, like
I popped for that. I have a soft spot for the Chaotix boys. I just wish they would actually not mess them up.
Yeah. This is actually, to me, their best betrayal, probably.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I love that intro cutscene with them, where like Charmy and Vector are like, you know, trying to figure out ways to get money, and then like they get the dollar signs, and Espio's like, "What the hell's going on?" And they're like, "Look, we got this great idea. We'll star in this video game or whatever," and they just do it.
This game also has like this game introduced me to so many freaking artists, like. Team Dark, their main theme, This Machine, was performed by the band Julian K, and I'm like a massive Julian K fan, so like that was a cool like little gateway to that. Inherently though, to me, like the biggest problem with this game is like the 4 stories, you have to play all of them, and they are literally just when you actually look at them, they're just easy, medium, and hard mode.
Yeah.
Plus Chaotix being its own weird thing.
Like I think chaotic, like it's if the way I described it was like Rose is like very easy,
Yep.
or yeah, like easy beginner mode. Sonic is probably your normal medium. Chaotix is like medium to hard, where it's like it's not like it's a little bit harder than Sonic, but it's not as hard as Team Dark, which is the hard mode.
So
But the
Chaotix
extra
is
objectives is what gives it that little extra difficulty.
yeah, Chaotix is interesting because like some levels will be pathetically easy and then other ones are brutally hard for no reason, and you're like,
Yeah,
it's just a mess.
it's as inconsistent as the Chaotix boys are.
Yes. And Team Dark's, and also like the way that they change the difficulty is they just change the location of the ending of the stage. So like all the Amy levels, like Team Rose levels are like really short. The Team Sonic levels are all perfectly length, and then the Team Dark levels are just obnoxiously long.
Yeah, playing as Team Dark in that game is just a pain in the ass.
Miserable.
Yeah, it really is.
And it doesn't help too that the levels are in the same order for each game story, which I feel like was a big missed opportunity. They could have randomized it possibly a bit.
I think it would have helped. Like it feels all the different, like the game isn't really catered to all the different characters. Like when you play as Team Sonic, like the game is catered to Team Sonic.
Oh yeah.
And that's like the best experience. The Team Amy stuff is okay, but you know, I'm not the biggest fan of those characters. Amy and Big. I love Cream. Cream the Rabbit's great, but never cared for the other two. Chaotix, I love me the Chaotix boys, but you know, they never get a fair crack of the whip and probably never will. They're the Waluigi of the Sonic universe.
Yeah.
And then you have Team Dark, where it's like it feels like they're trying too hard
Like
to make it work. Like
I
they're
was
really trying to make it work, and it's just like stop.
I always laughed because have you ever seen the YouTuber Some Call Me Johnny before?
Yeah.
I always laugh with his Sonic Heroes review where he literally refers to Team Dark as Shadow. What the fuck? Rouge? Oh, that's cool. Ah, Gamma on steroids.
That's incredibly right.
I like Omega though. I honestly, this game like play in terms of character gameplay, I think they all play really well.
Yeah, like it controls well, and like for a game where you have to control 3 characters, they make it work.
I put an asterisk there. It controls well on the GameCube and Xbox.
Yeah, well, I grew up with it on the GameCube, and I have the GameCube version still to this day, and that's whenever I play it, that's how I play, and it's perfectly fine.
Definitive version of the game is the GameCube one.
Yeah.
If you've ever, so for people who don't know, this game was the first multi-platform Sonic game, and the PS2 version was utterly butchered.
Do you think it was intentional?
So believe it or not, the game wasn't even supposed to come out on PlayStation. And the reason why it ended up being such a mess was the game's engine was designed with the Xbox and GameCube in mind, because the GameCube and Xbox were pretty comparable graphically. Yeah. Xbox was more powerful, but the GameCube wasn't a slouch by any means.
No.
The PS2, despite being the greatest console of all time, was actually kind of underpowered. Like a lot
says
of people.
Who says it was the greatest of all time?
It has Tales of the Abyss on it. I mean,
so's the 3DS.
It's Persona 4.
So does the Vita and everything else now.
I know. I joke. The PS2 is the best-selling console of all time.
Yeah,
and it has.
I put an asterisk on that number, but
true. But it also has one of the greatest game libraries like out there.
Yes, that's why most of them have been ported.
Yes. But going back to it though, like it was underpowered compared to the other two, and the engine that was originally intended for Sonic Heroes wasn't going to work on the PlayStation 2. And Sony basically kind of bullied them into like putting the game on PlayStation, because Sony had a lot of sway at that point, because the 6th generation of consoles was probably one of the biggest curb stomps of all time.
Sony being a bully, they would never.
I mean, Nintendo's guilty and Microsoft is also guilty, so
yeah, but you have to think about it with Sony. Like their last console sold 100 million plus and was the best-selling thing ever, and then they topped it with the PS2.
Yep.
And then the PSP was on its way out, or was coming out, and I remember the fury around the PSP at the time, where everyone thought, oh, Sony's going to dominate the handheld market. They were going to knock Nintendo off their pedestal. That obviously didn't happen.
No,
but that's for a whole another reason.
You want to know a
So-
fun, useless fact about the PSP?
What's that?
It sold more than the 3DS.
I think the numbers on the PSP, they're not official, are they?
I mean, the 3DSs aren't really either, but
Well, I think they're more reliable, but because I think the PSP, it's what, between 60-80 million in that
Yeah.
ballpark, and the number that we've always had for the 3DS is what, 75 or 70.
it's actually less than you'd think, but it's one of those funny things when you look at it. And it's like, the PSP technically sold more.
Yeah, well, you have to think with the 3DS, how many of those sales were the same person buying like 3 or 4 3DSs?
That is very true.
So,
Also, even then, like, I'm not saying like the PSP is better than the 3DS. I just always point that out because, like, whenever like people say the PSP was a failure, I always look at them like it was not a failure.
It's only a failure relative because of
the
what
DS
it was competing against.
The DS is the second best-selling console of all time.
Yes,
It's
and yeah, because I think Sony wasn't prepared for the DS. Because I mean, if you look at the PSP, you can tell they were trying to like compete with the Game Boy Advance.
Oh yeah,
Because
and
like it's the same form factor and everything.
Also, people thought the DS was going to flop because people thought the dual screens was a bad idea at the time.
I mean, to be fair, I was anti-DS at the start, but that's because I loved my GBA. I still love my GBA to this day. I'm a big GBA nerd. And so when the DS came out, I thought it was, Nintendo abandoning my favorite console. How dare they? And it became this like, huge, big success. And I refused to jump on board until many years later when I finally got around to playing one and went, oh yeah, this is actually a really good console in its own right.
Yeah. So just to clarify though, on the PSP sales, it is an estimate, but it's actually an estimate of between 80 to 82 million.
Gotcha.
And the 3DS only sold 75 million.
Yes. In fact, I think the PSP sold more than the GBA did.
No, the GBA was like 81. Well, that's the estimate thing.
Yeah.
It's unclear.
Yeah.
But anyways,
but we all know the GBA is king.
It is a great handheld.
It's the best handheld.
Only on the market for like 4 years, but it was great.
No, it was on the market till like 2008.
Well, it was on the market, but the DS had come out in 2004, and basically the DS just became everyone's GBA at that point.
Kind of, because I remember when I lived in that time, like, to me, the DS didn't kick off till 2006 when they did the DS Lite. That's when everything got rolling. Those first 2 years felt really shaky for the DS, in my opinion.
Yeah, that is fair. But Sonic.
But Sonic Heroes, yeah, I don't hate Sonic Heroes. I don't.
My best way of describing Sonic Heroes is it's okay. It's not bad. It's not amazing, but it's like a perfectly solid 3D platformer for the time that has some flaws that hold it back from being a great game.
And it's weird to think it's never been ported.
Other than they ported the PS2 version to PSN for some reason, and everyone was like, this is the worst version of the game.
Yeah, like it's so weird with the Sonic series how like some of the Sonic games they'll just constantly port forever. But then there are certain other ones, particularly more in the 3D era, where they just kind of forget about them.
Yeah.
And people just kind of throw them to the wayside, which I think for Heroes is unfair.
Heroes is that weird kind of like bridging the gap point between like the beginning of the decline and like the end of like the good years for the 3D Sonic games, in my opinion.
It does start like a lull that goes for a good couple years for sure.
Because the next game in the series, which some people don't consider a mainline Sonic game, I consider it a mainline Sonic game because it is a mainline Sonic game just in terms of how it's made. Shadow the Hedgehog.
This is one of the few ones I've never played.
You've never played Shadow?
I know it. I even remember as a kid, I had opportunities to rent it and I just didn't do it. And to this day, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I know this game's reputation. I know what surrounds it.
If you can find it for $5, it's worth playing just for how stupid it is.
I mean, I have it on my my hard drive that's plugged into the back of my Series X for my emulators.
Oh, I'd give it a playthrough just to see it because it's funny. It's the most 2000s edgelord game you'll ever play.
Yeah, like the concept of making a game around Shadow the Hedgehog it's not on paper, I get it, but at the same time, like what do you do? And
Give Shadow a gun.
yeah, have him just shoot people, which
Ironically,
is
the gun gameplay is like the best part of this game.
yeah, that's weird, especially in that era where like third person shooters still were not like great. But this was the same year as Resident Evil 4. The fuck?
This was also the end of the Crush 40 era too, because this was the final Sonic game to be developed with Jun Sonoy as the main composer.
And they went out on a bang.
They did, because we got two more awesome tracks. We got I Am All of Me, which was not originally supposed to be the main theme, because the main theme was originally supposed to be a song called Who I Am by a band called Magnify.
Mm-hmm.
The story goes is that if you want to have, basically because they don't want to have the same issue that they had with like the first two Sonic games where they don't technically own those songs.
Yeah.
If you want to make a song for a Sonic game, Sega fully owns that song, like outright, and you're basically signing it away forever.
Makes sense.
Magnify, like Who I Am, is one of Magnify's best songs they've ever written. And the song was basically, they were like, we don't want to lose this song forever, so they retracted it from the offer to make it the main theme, which is hilarious because if you listen to the song, it is clearly about Shadow the Hedgehog.
Yeah,
and
I've heard that song.
It actually syncs up with the opening cutscene like perfectly. Like it's almost like too uncanny.
Yeah, it's like, if I'm sure somebody on YouTube's probably like put the cutscene up, but with that song, so
they have. I've seen it.
Yeah.
It syncs up perfectly.
Yeah. And doesn't Shadow, doesn't it do the whole like diverging paths thing? Where
So
it's like, oh, you go left, you do this thing, but if you go right, you do this thing.
As a trade-off, because Magnify still owed Sega a song, they instead wrote the song All Hail Shadow, which was the main theme of like the hero pathway.
Yeah.
Because at the end of each pathway, there were credits would play, and it would play a different song. And this game has some of the most like 2000s music possible.
Oh yes, it does.
Like it has obviously Magnify doing All Hail Shadow. Julian K came back and did a song called Waking Up. Mm-hmm. My favorite, PM5K, did Almost Dead, which is just the greatest fucking thing ever. Good old Spider One. And there's also the song Chosen One by a band called A2. Although I think A2 was actually an acronym for another band. I can't remember their name because they didn't really do much else. And then, of course, Crush 40 did I Am All of Me, the opening theme, and one of the greatest actually arguably my favorite Crush 40 song, Never Turn Back, the credits theme.
Oh, yeah. I have heard that one before.
I love the piano introduction.
It's pretty good.
So the problem with Shadow the Hedgehog is this game is just a chore to play in like every way, like because you have to beat it 10 times to get the final ending.
Yeah, you thought Sonic Heroes was bad.
Yeah, and there's like hundreds of different pathways you can possibly do, which you'd think is a good idea, but the problem is some of these levels are the definition of bullshit.
Yeah, like I'm looking at a schematic somebody made on Wikipedia for like all the different paths, and it looks like it reminds me of Outrun.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
But like with Outrun, it's a racing game, so you can have these, like, that encourages replayability. But with Shadow, it's like seeing all this stuff, it feels like it's way too complicated.
Well, the problem is every playthrough starts with Westopolis, and you get so fucking tired of Westopolis after like 4 playthroughs. I mean, thank God Westopolis' theme is fucking badass, but
so when you split off into the different paths, is it all like different looking levels, or
so like, there is like a good like 20 or so different levels or something, because like you can like go all over the place. Basically, the way it works is each level has a good route, a bad route, and a neutral path. The neutral path is usually just go to the end of the level.
Yeah.
The good route is usually something like save a bunch of guards, and the bad route is like kill a bunch of guards. Because edgy, but
yeah, freedom of choice.
Yeah, like the best way to play the game is literally just do neutral all the way, because you just go from beginning to end. The problem is
speedrun it.
The problem is that you have to play the game 10 times, because you have to get there is 5 different ending paths, and then each of those ending paths has a good version and a bad version of the ending path.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah. Some of the endings are downright ridiculous too. Like one of my favorites is so you remember all those, we didn't talk about it, but there was a point in Heroes where like they find a bunch of shadow androids that Eggman just has.
Oh yeah.
Those come back in Shadow, and there's like this point where Shadow has an existential crisis and like thinks he's an android, and one of the endings is literally Shadow going like, I am Shadow Android, creation of Dr. Eggman. This is who I am. There's that one. What my favorite is the one where he karate chops Eggman to death. Like, there's so many goofy fucking endings in this game.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Also, this was the game where Eggman created the robot, which is a slot machine, and some of the settings literally shoot himself. Yeah.
An E10 plus game with suicide in it.
Yeah.
I love it.
This game is hilarious. Like, I used to think it was awful. Now I think it's hilariously bad, but in like the good way.
I see why it was named Best Platformer of 2005 by Nintendo Power.
Hell yeah, it was. This was also the game that infamously introduced the 4Kids actors.
Yes.
They sound very much out of Sonic X at this time, but it also gave us Mike Pollock, the greatest thing to come out of 4Kids. As
trade-off.
The voice of Eggman. Like, there's a reason why he's never been replaced, because he's that good.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that voice. It is a solid Eggman voice.
This is also the game that introduced the characters swearing for no reason, which is hilarious.
Fuck.
Like where Sonic just would randomly go like, "Damn it, he's getting away." Like it's
like the vibe I get from this game is that it was trying really hard to be edgy.
Oh yeah,
and like failing miserably. And I think at the time, some people probably thought it was like pandering. Or other people were like, "Oh, edgy, ugh." But I think we live in a time now where a lot of us can look at that stuff and just laugh at it, and just enjoy it for the absurdity.
No, totally.
Because I think at the time people, had a tough time with that.
Oh yeah. Well, the game controls like ass too. Like that's the biggest problem I have with it. It's so. If you thought Heroes was slippery, Shadow is like the slipperiest game I've ever played.
Because he's on fucking skates.
Yeah, it's worse than that.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah, so Shadow, kind of funny. Also the story is so stupid. Like Shadow's apparently a half alien.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
The main villain is voiced by Goku.
Forever connected, those franchises.
Yep. Yep. But so I guess Shadow is bad. It's not a good game at all, but it's kind of a funny game, so I give it a pass at times.
It sold 2 million copies.
Yep. Wasn't even a player's choice.
For some reason, yet it sold 2 million copies.
Yep.
I mean, according to Wikipedia, it did.
No, I believe it. It sold decent.
Apparently, you had to get, according to this, you had to sell at least 250,000 copies in North America to be a player's choice for GameCube.
Yep. And forever
which feels like a really low number. But
I mean, to be fair,
GameCube wasn't selling, so
no, the GameCube is borderline a failed console.
No, it was a failed console.
Yeah.
But that's how you get games like F-Zero with a player's choice. Then we still don't know how much that game sold to this day.
That is true. But anyways, so moving on, you might remember in the first Sonic episode, we talked about Sonic's 15th anniversary, the greatest anniversary Sonic ever had. He had great games like Sonic Genesis, how did they screw a port up that bad? The game.
Oh yeah.
Sonic Rivals, like an okay 2D racing platformer. Sonic Riders, a surprisingly fun racing game that's really hard to get into.
Yeah.
And Sonic 06, the big flagship game of the 15th anniversary.
Sonic the Hedgehog. It was meant to be a reboot.
Yep. This game has so many names. Like some people call it Sonic 06, others call it Sonic 2006, others call it Sonic Next Gen, others call it Sonic 360.
A lot of people just call it bad.
Or people call it Sonic the Hedgehog screaming because it's in all caps. Yeah, so this game was supposed to be a reboot.
Yeah,
Keyword
it
being was.
it's crazy to think how I've heard so many times people say they should just do Sonic Adventure 3. They need to do Sonic Adventure 3.
They did. It's called Sonic 06.
Exactly. And
So there's a YouTuber. He used to be an LPer. He's retired now, but he was under the name the Great Clement. He did like a 6-hour review of Sonic 06, and
there's lots to talk about.
Throughout the review, he constantly makes jokes about, there's some. I'm thinking of a name that this game should have been called, like throughout the whole video, because it literally this game is Sonic Adventure 3.
Yeah, and it's funny to think if it was called Sonic Adventure 3, would people really be clamoring for a Sonic Adventure 4? Probably not.
No.
Um,
So there's a lot to unpack with 06. For starters, this game literally is the game that drove Yuji Naka to leave Sega.
like if there's any game that like ruined Sonic's reputation, and to this day it still struggles to bounce back from, it is this game.
Yes.
Because if you think about it, you were there as well. Before this game, the perception of Sonic was typically very positive.
Yeah, like
people were
Heroes,
like, Sonic was good.
Yeah, Heroes got decent reviews at the time.
Yeah, people liked Heroes. People liked the adventure games. Like there was some weird stuff here and there, but it wasn't.
I mean, Advance was like a system seller. I mean, Advance 3 sucks, but I mean, it still sold well.
I mean, hey, we had Advance 1 and 2, so it's all good.
Yeah,
like
Rush was a great game.
Yeah, people were vibing with Sonic, and then this game comes out, and it's just such a colossal failure.
It's funny
across the board.
It's funny that Shadow the Hedgehog was considered just a minor dip in quality.
Yeah, like some people really like that game, and I'm not. Yeah, I haven't played it, so I cannot say one way or the other. But
it has a passionate fan base, kind of like this game does. I don't know why this game has a passionate fan base.
I think because I think its fan base for this is like the fan base for The Room, the Tommy Wiseau film.
Yeah,
where it's such a colossal failure that it's so intriguing. But I do have a question, because I've thought about Sonic 06 a lot. I played it back in the day on the PS3. That's how I beat it.
The worst version.
Yeah, I do own a 360 copy of it now.
I do too. That's how I played it my second playthrough.
Yeah. Don't ask what I paid for it. And I've played through it, and I've done all the thing, and I the one question I have with 06, if it wasn't such a buggy mess, would it be so hated?
No, because the story is atrocious.
Like, the story is bad, but
so
again, it's a Sonic game. Do we really play the Sonic games for the story? Probably not.
My thing with 06 is like the glitches are kind of like a smokescrreen for a lot of the game's more complex problems to me. Like the story is just bad, like on so many levels. Like Shadow the Hedgehog has a bad story, but it's funny. This game's story is just like, who thought this was a good idea? Like I always question everything about, like, there are actually people who defend this game's story, and I'm always like, what are you on? Like I don't understand why.
Like the whole integrating like humans into it, and like, again, furry bait. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The redesign of Eggman is terrible.
It's the most hilarious thing ever.
It's so bad.
I love the logic of this game where it's like they were like, we want to put Sonic in the real world, so that's why everything's super realistic. Let's make Eggman realistic. Meanwhile, we got these giant walking cartoon mascots running around.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of, this might be a weird comparison, of like Bomberman Act Zero. When they were like, we have to go into the HD era. We're doing this big new thing. We need to like update this, essentially. And it feels like with 06, that's almost what they're trying to do. Give it more of like an update to appeal to a wider range of people.
So I think for 06, before we get into like the really bads, I want to point out a few things that I legitimately do like about this game. For starters, like soundtrack, obviously the game's soundtrack is better than the game itself. Like that's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
I do think this game has some good level design, particularly the Sonic stages. Like there are some very well designed levels that have some pretty cool alternate routes. The problem is they're attached to such a confusing mess of a game, because this game also notably brought back the hub worlds that hadn't been seen since Adventure.
Yes.
And they are the most lifeless, boring places I think I've ever seen.
Oh yeah. Full of just like real people.
The Sims characters.
Essentially. Which Sonic and the Sims would actually be amazing, but like
The most
when I play Sonic 06, to me it's like I feel like there's a decent game in there somewhere. It's buried very deep.
there are so I will say Sonic 06 has strong moments. It's just
Yeah.
there's so many more bad moments that just drag it down, in my opinion.
Like it almost feels like the perfect example of, in this, the 360 PS3 generation, that like the Japanese side of game development was kind of falling behind, and the Western side was starting to like really gain traction. And there's all these stories about like Japanese game developers at the time going into the HD era really struggling to make games, to thinking they had to appeal more to Western audiences, and just trying to keep up with the changing climate. And Sonic 06 almost feels like a perfect example of that, where they're like, oh, even though Sonic has appealed in the West more than Japan its entire existence, they're like, no, we need to make this more for Western gamers.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't really need to do that.
No, unfortunately, the big thing they missed there was the fact that most people like their games because they weren't Western.
Yeah, it's because Sonic is fun. And this game, you can have fun with it sometimes.
This game has fun moments. Like
yes, but a lot of it is a slog.
I enjoy replaying a lot of the Sonic levels in this game because they are legitimately pretty fun.
Yeah.
Until
the shadow levels are
The shadow levels would be fun if they didn't add the fucking combat mechanics for no reason.
Yes, but the worst part of the game, I think you'll agree, is Silver.
Silver annoys me because like there was promise there. Like legitimately, we have games like Psychonauts which prove that you could make a game based around that style of gameplay.
But this is Sonic we're talking about.
True.
Like if I want to play Psychonauts, I'll play Psychonauts.
True. I feel like it could have been done well if they did it well. The problem was they just didn't.
Yeah, because the game just isn't overall very well refined in like any of its aspects. Like the Sonic stuff kind of works because it's Sonic, they can kind of figure it out. But in that tradition of, oh, we have to have all these different characters and all these different play styles, this is to me where it kind of falls flat on its face and kind of loses any sort of credibility that they had from, say, like Adventure 2, where it was like kind of consistent overall when it came to the other playstyles. Here, it's just like Sonic is fine, Shadow's and then Silver is bad, but the game overall is bad.
What's funny to me though is Shadow has such mediocre gameplay, but out of the three stories, his is arguably the most interesting.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Like honestly, I think if Shadow's story in 06 was the story for his own game, it might have made both games better, honestly.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because there are some really cool moments in this game. There's also some really what the fuck things that happen in this game as well. Like when you're exploring like Soliana, which is, like I said, the most like lifeless like hub world I think I've ever seen in a video game.
Yeah, one of the worst hub worlds ever.
There are some oddities in that hub world though. Like to me, like you'll run into like the random accordion guy who looks like Mario just playing accordion.
I think that was intentional.
Yeah, he's entertaining. There's Sonic Man, which is literally a Sonic cosplayer.
Oh, I love Sonic Man.
He's great. And then my favorite what the hell thing that they threw in there is Hats and the Pigeon.
Yeah.
The random ass pigeon you can talk to in like the dock.
Yeah, there are some weird quirks about this game.
It's funny. I tell people, I bring up Hatson all the time, and every time I do, I either get people go, "Oh yeah, Hatson," or I get the people whose response is, "What?" because it's such a random thing.
Yeah, like it's
There's also there's a Shadow level where Shadow beats up a train.
yes. Yes, it's a shame he doesn't suplex it, a la Final Fantasy VI. But
Well, he does kick Silver in the back of the head, so
oh, that's
the
like the best. That's the best moment ever.
it is.
I love that part so
Also,
much.
also Princess Elise tries to commit suicide at one point. And,
Well, I think because she realized she was in Sonic 06 and was trying to get out.
yeah, and then Sonic happened to be there to catch her.
She's like, no, and he's like, no, let me kiss you real quick. Get you out of here.
There's a point in this game where like Jason Griffith does like this laugh as Sonic, and I swear he's like slowly going insane.
Probably because I mean, the development of this game, the further we get from it, it gets we learn more and more about it, and just the whole thing was a mess,
Like
a
how
colossal mess.
like how the Havoc engine was like this new cool thing, and they thought it'd be a great idea to apply Havoc physics to fucking everything in the game.
Yeah,
That one of the reasons why it's such a unstable mess, because like literally everything has weird physics. Like one of my favorite things. So not for nothing, I love playing Sonic 06, not because it's a good game, just because I love the weird shit that can happen.
yeah. It like it's a new experience every time.
Like you can kick rocks and fly into the sky for no reason, or like make boxes levitate just by drop kicking.
Yeah, it's one of those games that like it's a work of art, but not in the way that it kind of wants to be.
Also,
You know?
keeping up the Dragon Ball references, like Silver is clearly supposed to be Trunks,
Yeah, like 100%.
even with like his weird pothead hair.
Just put a little water on him every day. He'll be okay.
Also, this game completely fucked up Blaze's backstory.
Oh yeah, it does, which
the-
really sucks because I
to
like
the-
Blaze.
I mean, she's the best character in this game, arguably, but
Yeah, I mean she's the best character in the Rush games too.
yeah, I love how they just kind of retcon like that this game never happened in like Rush Adventure, where they're kind of like, yeah, back from my own invention again, own dimension. The future shit never happened.
Yeah, like this game has just completely been scrubbed from history. So
Yeah,
as it like Sega wants to pretend it never happened.
well,
But
it kind of does end with it never happening.
yeah,
Although Generations kind of makes that a little confusing, but we'll get to
we'll
Generations because there's
What? How do you think this game would have been if they had made a Wii port?
oh the fabled Wii port that was supposed to be a thing. Honestly, the Wii port probably would have been better because it probably would have ran on a competent engine.
Potentially, or it would have been the worst version because they would have forced like motion control into
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And yeah.
Well, there's a reason why. But I guess before we move on to the next mainline game, we should talk about the game that the Wii did get instead, which I think is worse than 06.
So you don't want to talk about that? There's a guy who is like trying to fix 06.
Oh, the 06 remaster that's going on.
Yeah, where it's like he's essentially like he doesn't know how to program at all. Like he doesn't even own a copy of the game or whatever, but he's going through and trying to clean up the bugs. Basically, he's
Yeah.
essentially QAing the game.
So I've seen clips of that. It looks interesting. I mean, unfortunately, the game tied to it is still 06.
Yeah, but I think he's trying to at least iron out the bugs so that like you can judge the game on its own merits beyond the bugs, which has always been kind of my thing with 06 is I think people overstate the glitches. I mean, I get why you do, but I imagine if they weren't there, like would the game have like a 40 something on Metacritic? No, it'd probably be like a mid upper 60s maybe.
Yeah.
That'd be my take on it.
Yeah, 06's like reception is hilarious because it's like, wow, like how did they get that bad?
Yeah, like how did they fuck it up this bad? And
Which is hilarious because I guess
And do you think this was when people were starting to say Sonic was never good?
well, this is also when the internet was starting to become a thing and you started getting those hot takes coming from people.
Yeah.
Like the Sonic was never good thing is still pisses me off because it's like that was just John Tron talking out of his ass like he usually does.
Yes.
And I mean, I got nothing against John Tron personally, but like when he said that, I was like, you're just starting shit, dude.
It's not the worst thing he's ever said.
No, well, yeah. And I mean, the other big offender of causing all the Sonic hatred is Aaron Hansen, and
That
Aaron
God,
Hansen.
don't get me started, man.
Well, I'll give Aaron Hansen credit. He's come out and basically said it's all a joke, like an act. He's just doing it because he thinks it's funny.
I still have issues with it, but
Yeah,
we can get to that later.
well, yeah, his adventure playthrough where he forces glitches the entire time.
Anyways, do you want to talk about Sonic and the Secret Rings?
Yeah, it's worse than 06.
I've never played Secret Rings.
Imagine an on-rails Sonic game that you have to control with the Wiimote.
Sounds bad.
Yep.
So Sonic Unleashed, eh?
So I guess just to give a quick clarification, Sonic 06, not 06, Sonic Secret Rings was literally made as a replacement for the 06 port for the Wii because they realized that was just going to be a impossibility with what they had going on.
Yeah, so I think one of them may have looked there. So somebody on the dev team was probably looking around. They picked up their copy of Prince of Persia and the Two Thrones and went, Sonic.
Yeah.
And we get Secret Rings.
The main bot villain looks like Majin Buu.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny.
Like the whole Sonic storybook idea, I think is like a neat idea.
So I'll get more into it when we get to
Black Knight.
Black Knight, because I have things to say about Black Knight. But
yeah.
Secret. What were you gonna say?
But I think the whole like storybook idea of putting Sonic in all these different like, you know, time frames and expanding sort of the places he could be and sort of like the art direction and everything, I think is a neat idea.
Oh, graphically, this game looks great. I love the watercolor like storybook cutscenes. Like, I think that is a great idea. I wish they did more of.
I wish they would too.
Unfortunately, both the storybook games flopped hard, but
oh yeah, they did.
Well, actually,
on a very successful console where the Sonic games would sell.
Ironically, actually, Secret Rings did pretty good, and it's the worst of the two. And Black Knight, the better of the two, flopped hard.
Well, I think because people learned.
Yeah. But I guess to describe how Secret Rings plays, Sonic is on rails. He always moves forward, and you move him left and right by turning the Wiimote like you're driving a car. And you have to turn it back to make him go backwards, and to make him jump, you have to like fling it up in the air. It's not good.
That sounds awful.
It did give us Darkspine Sonic, though.
Oh, Darkspine Sonic.
You know, the not supersonic for once.
Yeah.
Where Jason Griffith just gets really edgy for no reason.
I would have preferred Supersonic.
Yeah. I'll give Jason Griffith credit. This is one of his better performances. Like, this was like the start where I think he got really good. Finally gelled with the role, in my opinion.
Yeah, and sometimes voice actors need a little time to kind of get used to.
Oh, yeah.
Like what they want to do with a character, so I totally get it.
But moving on now to what I think is a Sonic game that gets too much hate, Sonic Unleashed.
Does it now? Does it still?
Half of it does.
Because Sonic Unleashed, I have an interesting history with this game. Like, I remember when it was coming out, I was excited for it because I thought it looked really cool. And I was like, you know, Werehog, whatever, right? And then I read the reviews at the time, and the reviews were not good. People were bashing the hell out of this game, and it pushed me away. And I never played it for a very, very long time. And then turn to now, like, it's like as time has gone on, people have, you know, I feel like they've overcorrected and are trying to say like, oh no, this is actually like one of the better 3D Sonic games. Like, this is one of the best Sonic games, period.
All right, that's a bit much, but
I've heard some people make that. Like, it's funny how a good example, IGN, when they reviewed this at the time, they gave the 360 version a 4.5 out of 10. But recently, I think they did like a top 10 like Sonic games of like all time list, I think, or like 3D Sonic games or something. This game is in that list.
Yeah, well, I mean,
and they don't even mention the original review.
Well, IGN is like the Rolling Stone of like video game like magazines where they just flip flop on everything.
Yeah, but it's just that kind of shows the arc that Sonic Unleashed has gone on through the years.
So Unleashed for me was the game that made me realize you cannot trust Sonic like reviews at all.
Yeah.
because like I saw the reviews and I was still like I saw the trailers and I looked at the reviews and I was like, I have to try this because that looks too good to pass up.
Yeah, it shied me away at the time.
And so Unleashed is an interesting one because there's two versions of this game.
Yep.
There's the 360 and PS3 version, which is the definitive version of this game. And then there's the Wii PS2 version of the game, which was developed by Dimps, believe it or not.
Yeah. Some people say it's the better one.
Yeah, some people do. And then I feel like they haven't actually played it in years and they just remember it being better.
I think it's because it doesn't force the sun and moon medal thing on you.
That is very true. Like that is, so I guess going into that is the game's biggest detriment, in my opinion, is the sun and moon medals.
And also, I agree with the crowd a little bit. And the werehog, I don't hate the werehog stuff. I do think those levels go on.
That's the problem with
too long.
The werehog itself is very well programmed and well designed. So
it's just God of War.
I think I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but I think Unleashed is the most polished Sonic game that's ever been made.
I don't know if I would say ever made, but it
was definitely at the time probably the most polished though.
Yes, because when you play Unleashed, you can tell that Sega are like, we cannot fuck this up again, as we did 06. Mm-hmm. That's when they introduced the Hedgehog engine, which they still use to this day, I think.
And they still have not been able to get it to its full potential because it's apparently too powerful.
Yeah, but yeah, like the polish, like that opening cutscene in Sonic Unleashed looks amazing.
I'm not gonna lie, when I saw that opening cutscene, I thought we were gonna get a supersonic fight at the start of the game as a twist, but I digress.
No, but with Unleashed, it feels like they are trying to right the wrongs. Like they're going back to the more silly kind of art style, trying to keep it more in line with the consistency with how the Sonic games have been before.
Mm-hmm. And Sonic was the only playable character. That was a huge thing at the time.
Yes, and apparently, it was the right choice.
Apparently, Shadow and Knuckles gameplay was planned, but it was canceled early in development.
And I think that was for the best, because it allowed them to focus purely on the Sonic gameplay,
mm-hmm.
which the day stages, the times where you're Sonic,
are some of the best levels in Sonic history.
I would argue it's the best 3D Sonic ever. Is the day stages Unleashed? They are fantastic. They control great. They look great. They run great. They're a blast to play through. I'll replay them a million times. Don't care.
Mm-hmm.
They're so fucking fun.
So
and because it's the introduction of the boost formula,
yep.
And it's like when you're playing it, you're like, this is what Sonic should be. Like it's ultra fast. You get that speed, but at the same time, you're not. Yeah, there's platforming, and you don't feel like you're out of control. Like you're still perfectly in control. You can move Sonic on a dime if you need to. Like having the sidestep is great.
Oh, the sidestep is my favorite thing.
Love the sidestep. Even when you like curve corners, like it feels good. Like that's like a racing game influence. How they do that with like the spin dash around the drift. Yeah, but
so
it's handled really well.
I will say the drift is probably the one thing that like later games improved upon though.
Yeah. But it's still handled, I think, really well here.
Oh, it was fine. Like this Unleashed is the reason why Unleashed I feel like gets a bad rap is because half of the game is universally acclaimed and the other half is incredibly mixed.
Polarizing.
Yes.
Yeah, because the werehog stuff, again, it's another case of Sega being like, we can't just do normal Sonic. We have to do more.
Well, they're always afraid to make the game too short. Which
I think would be for Sonic, it'd be fine because if it's really good, you're just going to replay it.
I mean, we learned with not the next game, but a game coming up that they can do it perfectly fine.
Yeah, you can make it work. They eventually figured it out, and Unleashed is like them getting closer to that.
Also, Unleashed literally does everything 06 tried to do, but better. Like,
yeah,
Unleashed has the hub worlds, but they're all super small and super compact, and they're all super fun and interesting to explore.
And I love the character designs.
Yeah, because they're
like they're humans in a Sonic world. They're cute.
They're cartoony. They're not realistic. Like
and I like them.
They are. They're fun. And we get Professor Pickle. One of my. You ever played the ROM hack Pickle Unleashed?
No.
they replaced Sonic with Professor Pickle.
Okay, I have to play that now.
He
That
he
sounds
run
amazing.
he runs like a Naruto. It's great.
That sounds great. Yeah. And also, Unleashed introduces a new character,
Chip.
Chip,
Also,
who hasn't been overused to death like a lot of Sonic characters.
well, he only appeared in this game,
Yeah.
and that
Which
was
is
good.
interesting that they wouldn't, like, even in like Generations they didn't bring him up.
Nope, he didn't appear at all, which I was amazed by because I thought they would have brought Chip back for
Yeah.
Generations.
Because I don't mind Chip. I think he's all right.
Chip's funny as hell too. Like
Yeah.
like even like in the levels, like there's a gimmick where you can feed Chip like different foods from like the different locations because the whole fun fact, Sonic it Unleashed outside of in Japan is actually known as Sonic World Adventure,
Yep.
which I actually prefer a title because it fits the vibe of this game as it is a world adventure.
Yeah.
But one of the gimmicks is you go from different parts of the world and you can feed Chip different food from like the different parts. And some of he gives like these funny reactions to all of the different foods, and some of them he hates, and he actually will drop an F-bomb or something going on. It's censored, so I just assume it's an F-bomb.
Yeah, yeah. But calling it Unleashed, I think it kind of emphasizes the whole werehog thing.
It makes both titles make sense. I just think I prefer World Adventure because it fits
Yeah.
with the adventure gimmick.
Sonic World Unleashed Adventure.
Mm.
Just put shoehorn them together. But yeah, the werehog stuff.
Plays fine, just the levels are too long, and
Yeah, it's just God of War, right? But
You
like,
get-
it's not as good as God of War,
No.
obviously. But
and you get really sick of hearing that freaking battle theme. Yeah,
it's burned into my brain.
you will hear that multiple times.
That's the thing. I like that track. It's overdone.
I like that track the first time I heard it. The worst
Yeah.
part too is though the background music of the night stages is so good. Like,
It is.
it's
It's just
so
overused.
jazzy and catchy.
Yeah, it's just repetitive as hell.
This
Which
was-
is the werehog stages. They're all just repetitive. And
This was also
they're-
the game that broke 360s
oh, really?
because of the water level. Like the 360 couldn't handle the water level. Like it was too much for it. Like
I mean, the original 360 couldn't handle a lot of things, but
someone actually ported all the Sonic Unleashed levels into Generations so you could play them on PC.
yeah.
And
Oh,
like,
is that Sonic like Unleashed like Day
yeah,
mod or whatever?
they it's funny though because of the PC's like capabilities, they actually were able to play the I think it's called like Adabats, the name of the level.
Mhm.
They were able to actually play it at a full 60 frames per second, and it is really weird to
Nice.
see because
Nice.
the 360 version slows down and like breaks the console. Like it can't handle it.
Yeah.
The PS3 one runs, but it like runs at like 20 frames per second.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Damn, Unleashed.
And I know this is one of the games that Sega tried to like delist and like remove it from like Metacritic and everything.
Yeah,
too.
because apparently it's bad.
Yeah, but they've brought it back, and I feel this one they're more okay with bringing up because the fans have done a lot of work to be like, no, this game's like good.
I mean, it has so many great things. I love the opening
Yeah.
theme, by the way, like Endless Possibilities.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that is a really good song.
Mostly because I'm a huge Bowling for Soup fan and I love Jared Reddick, but
Yeah, but again, it works for Sonic.
and then you get the epic. So also, we didn't talk about this in 06, but this was also the period where. So this is when Tomio Otani took over the sound direction. Fun fact: he was the guy that did the rap songs in Adventure 2.
Oh, okay.
But he started doing the sound direction, and for all of his games, he always would do a thing where there'd be a main theme. Like in 06, it was His World by Zebrahead.
Mhm.
But then he would do for the final boss theme, he would do the main theme, but he'd make it like epic orchestral.
Yeah.
This
is the orchestral era of Sonic music, and it's great.
because like the perfect Dark Gaia fight has an epic orchestral version of Endless Possibilities, which is just so awesome.
Yeah, very, very well done.
This game also ends to me on like one of the best like notes in a while, where like Chip goes away because spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't played Unleashed, Chip is actually Light Gaia.
Yeah.
And he has to go away to save the planet. but he like leaves Sonic with his little bracelet thing, and Sonic kind of smiles and just runs off into the sunset in a very Sonic-like ending.
Yeah, it's handled a lot better than some of the previous games. Like the story is simpler,
Unleashed has
and
a very underappreciated story, in my opinion.
yeah, I think because '06 was so you know batshit bonkers that they had to kind of bring it down a little bit.
Mm.
And they definitely did. Like Unleashed to me does feel like a response to '06, where they had to do something better. Otherwise, the series was probably going to die.
Yep.
And even though Unleashed didn't really get the respect it deserved at the time, people have come around on it a lot more, and people are like, no, this is actually like pretty solid.
So
And it's
Unleashed
back, and
definitely.
it's backwards compatible
Mm.
on the one in the series. And playing it on the series, like it runs really, really smooth.
Oh, Adabat probably functions on the series.
Yes, I think it does. Yeah.
So Unleashed definitely gave a lot of people faith in Sega again, though. Like they were like, it's not what we wanted, but at least we see there is progress. Like the Sonic stages, people were, ironically, people for years would be saying like, if they just made a game of nothing but Sonic Day stages, we'd buy it day one and it would be great. That wouldn't be the next game they'd make, but
No,
it's coming. So the next game they released is actually the second and final Storybook series game.
this is a short story.
Yep. And it is actually a game that I think gets too much hate.
The sword one?
Sonic and the Black Knight.
Yeah, Sonic and the sword. Sonic and the big cloud sword.
Yep. So this game, so the first game, so Sonic and the Secret Rings was basically Sonic is in Arabian Nights. This
Yeah.
one was basically Sonic in like Black Arthur.
King Arthur.
King Arthur.
Yeah.
So fun thing about this game, they let you use the nunchuck. It's still on rails and it's not on rails. It's not amazing, but I can get over it because they let you use the nunchuck. So now controlling Sonic isn't a chore.
Yeah, I
And
think they realized since they have the Wii control scheme to work with, they're like, we can't have it operate, the same way as like say a Sonic 06. So let's try to make a game that functions more specifically for the Wii control scheme in mind.
yep.
Which I think was a good idea.
So this game basically uses the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess style where you shake the Wiimote and the sword will go.
Yeah.
It's not amazing, but it's fine. Like I had no problems getting used to it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a fan of Twilight Princess on the Wii. I think the GameCube version's superior, but
Well, the best way to play it is on the Wii U at this point, but
yeah. But I don't know who has a Wii U anymore.
me and the guys from Retro Hangover.
Just that's all. Those are the only ones.
I bet Aaron from Super Pod Saga does too.
Yeah.
Knowing him, but
I mean, hopefully Nintendo brings those Wii U ports to the Switch next year,
I hope so.
and then we can finally get them off there.
Disclaimer: that wasn't a dig at Aaron. I love Aaron, but anyways, so moving on. So Black Knight is a pretty fun game just in terms of its scope. Like I love the King Arthur setting, and gameplay isn't awful. It's not amazing, but it's not like this is unplayable and I hate it.
Yeah.
And one thing about this game that I love is this game saw the return of Jun Sonoy as sound director. So we got 5 Crush 40 songs in this game.
And that's the best part about the game, isn't it?
It's one of the best things. I think the story is really good too. Like it has a really effective story that kind of pulls a few twists on you. Like the whole, you think the main villain is the main villain, then turns out nope, it's actually your partner that you've had the whole game is the main villain. Pretty fun twist.
Yeah.
Also, this game has by far Jason Griffith's best performance as Sonic, and literally it was also his final game.
Mm-hmm.
Like the 4 kids actors really found their stride right when they got fired. And this game also gave us, it's also uniquely one of the only Sonic games not to feature Robotnik.
Oh, really?
His emblem appears on a bonus item that you can find in a treasure chest at one point. That's literally his only appearance in the game, which I think is a nice twist.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sonic Sonic and the Black Knight, really good. Like it actually really refined the storybook setting. And I was bringing up the soundtrack because this game actually has a ton of contributors. Obviously, Jin Sonoy, Crush 40 came back, but also Richard Jocks did a bunch of tracks in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Howard Drawson from Sonic 3 did tracks in this game, which was amazing.
Oh yeah.
And he's kind of a controversial figure nowadays, but Tommy Tallarico also did a few tracks, which was kind of neat at the time.
Oh, Tommy Tallarico.
You remember back?
Did he work on this game?
He did. He did a couple tracks.
Okay. Because I know recently some people have been questioning the validity of some of the credits that he has had over the years on games. And that there are some games he's like, oh, I worked on it. Then people are like, I don't think you did.
He's in the credits, so I'll assume he definitely did
Yeah.
something.
Like, isn't the big one like Metroid Prime? That he's like, oh, I worked on Metroid Prime, and some people are like, no, you didn't.
I didn't know he worked on Metroid Prime, so I'm gonna.
I've heard him say he did. Like he's tried to say that he worked on Metroid Prime, but I'm pretty sure he didn't.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
I could be wrong on that.
I know he did. I know he did the awesome Spider-Man game on PS1.
Yeah, like some of his credits are legit, but I've heard some of his other credits are not that legit.
He's legitimately listed in the credits of the game.
Okay.
This game also has one of my favorite final boss themes with all I am or whatever I think it's called, or I forget the name of the song, but it has the singers from the band All Ends and Marty Friedman from Megadeth playing guitar.
Ooh.
Like it's a cool game. Well, I mean, because Marty Friedman is just a weeb and he lives in Japan, but
yeah,
and he does like Sailor Moon intros now.
Hey, if he's happy, he's happy.
Oh, he's thrilled. That's why he's the only guy that doesn't hate Dave Mustaine. Ex member of Megadeth that doesn't hate Dave Mustaine, I should say.
That is true. That is true.
But that's a tangent for another time. But yeah, Sonic Black Knight, great game. Well, not a great game, but a solid game that had a lot of potential and unfortunately sold poorly and killed the storybook series.
So like it handles the idea of like a Wii only Sonic game better than Secret Rings, though.
Oh yeah, I Secret Rings I hated every moment I was playing it. Black Knight, I legitimately was like, I don't love this, but I also don't hate this, and I enjoyed my entire playthrough.
Yeah.
But anyways, so
a certain Game Grump would disagree with you on that.
No, he hates everything. Well, no, he pretends to hate every Sonic game. Let's be.
God. Anyway.
So yeah, you remember how I mentioned like if only they made a Sonic game where it was nothing but daytime Unleashed stages?
Yeah.
Well, they did it. It's called Sonic Colors.
Kinda.
I mean, for the most part, they did.
Colors is a weird one because I remember when it came out, people were really high on it. They're like, this is good.
What's funny about Colors is it came out. It was announced at the same time as Sonic 4, and more people were hyped about Sonic 4.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then Sonic 4 came out, and people were kind of like, it's okay, but it's not what we wanted. And then they played Colors, and everyone's like, this is exactly what we wanted.
Yeah. And yeah, like people were really high on it at the time. But then when they, a couple years ago, did the Colors Ultimate port, that's when people like started bashing this game. And I'm like, but I thought we liked this game. Like, what happened?
I played that port and I was like, I don't see anything that people are complaining about. Like, I'm like, it's just, other than I didn't like the remix soundtrack as much.
Yeah, I didn't like it as much either.
I was like, it plays exactly the same. I don't see what the big deal is.
I know that when it first like was ported, it had some like bug glitch issues. Though I think some of the videos I saw on Twitter of like bugs were like faked.
Yeah, I don't trust anything Sonic related online. So
yeah, that's fair. And yeah, I have the Xbox version, and I haven't played through the whole thing, but I've played a good chunk of it. And yeah, it plays just as I remember on the Wii.
Yeah, I think it plays better on the Wii just because most games play better on their original systems. But
well, especially with consoles like the Wii, where it has like a very specific like control scheme to it, that yeah, it definitely like feels better on there. But For me,
Also,
playing it on
the
an Xbox controller was perfectly fine.
the controls weren't the problem. Like, to me, like, I think just like the Wii's graphical style had a very distinct look to it.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you can tell Sonic Colors, like the team had played Mario Galaxy, and that's what
Yeah.
they were going for. It's very comparable. But the whole like Dr. Robotnik setting up a giant amusement park in space to be like, oh, this is an apology for all the shit I've done over the years.
Oh, the best Mike Pollock dialogue in a Sonic game is in this
Yeah,
game.
he's like, and is in no way connected to any diabolical scheme. Like
You- you
it's perfectly done. It honestly reminds me of the Sonic like cartoons from the 90s.
See, if you ever want a good laugh, look up the isolated Eggman like PA announcement clips. They are hilarious. Like, and you could barely hear them in game, but like he says some outlandish shit like in the background of each game.
Yeah.
This
And even those like little robot characters that you see throughout the game, like those
Orbot and
remind me
Cubot. I love
they
those
remind
too.
me of characters from the Sonic like the animated show.
Like Scratch and Grounder or the two random robots from X that I forget the names of.
Yeah, or even like the one with like Urkel as Sonic in, like that original one. They gave me that kind of vibe.
Yeah. No, this
But
game, everything about Colors to me was like so refreshing.
it's very kid friendly.
It is.
Very kid friendly because I think the older the couple games before this were trying to appeal to that like kind of teenager market, and maybe that wasn't really the way to go with it because like we're teenagers in 2008 gonna play Sonic for the most part? Probably not. They're too busy with their Call of Duties.
Yeah.
So with Colors, they're like, let's make the next mainline Sonic for the Wii and cater it to like the Wii Nintendo audience because the Nintendo audience likes Sega stuff. It's been proven.
I will say though, it's a game that was very kid focused, but at the same time, it doesn't feel so dumbed down that adults won't enjoy it either.
No. When I say like kiddie focused, I mean more like the bright colors and the more kind of lighthearted dialogue and the more kind of it's more appealing to kids in that like the art style and everything.
It's also got a very like easy to pick up design where like you pick your levels
but it has like one of the issues I've had with like 3D Sonic consistently is that it has whenever 3D Sonic tries to do 2D Sonic, it never feels right.
Yeah.
And Colors in many ways is like a 2.5D Sonic game.
Yeah,
like it's very 2D focused.
It's 75% 2D.
Like, yeah, and it's the one issue I have with this game because when you do the 3D parts, I love it. I'm like, I'm in. This is awesome. But when it goes to 2D, I'm just like, oh man, because like the pace slows down, and it never 2D and 3D Sonic has never felt right to me ever.
I'll give
the closest is the next game.
Yeah, I'll give
Colors
I'll give Colors credit. It wasn't the most offensive they've done out of this style. Like,
oh, not at all.
Like it wasn't my favorite. Like I would have preferred the whole game to be 3D, but it wasn't like a pain. Like I was never like I hate this. I was like, it's not what I want 100%, but it's perfectly.
Yeah, but it's a shame that because of that, like I have to give the nod to the DS version of Colors, which we talked about last time.
Yep, Rush 3.
Yeah, because that game is amazing. It's like one of the best 2D Sonic games, period. And because like whereas the 3D Colors, like it's a good game. It is a good game. I wouldn't say don't play it. It is a fun game. I enjoy it. I need to like sit down and actually beat it.
Play it again.
I've never fully beaten it.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, the ending is really good.
Like I played a lot of it back in the Wii days. It was one of the games I had for the Wii that I played like a lot of. But I don't know why I never like sat down and properly like beat it start to finish. But one of these days I will.
It's also famously the first 3D Sonic game ever to let you play as Super Sonic in the levels.
Oh, it actually lets you play as Super Sonic. That's nice.
You have to get all the red rings, but once you do, you can play as Super Sonic. It's a cool little nod.
And I like the Wisps.
The Wisps were the best idea to come out of this game.
Yes, I love how they look. I love all the different the different abilities they give you. I think they're handled a little bit better in the DS version, but the Wisps are one of those instances of like them adding something to Sonic that I'm like, oh, I like that. You should keep that.
It was an
And
added
they have.
gimmick that wasn't stupid. Like,
Yeah. And they've stuck around. They haven't gone away.
they have. So
Yeah.
I always laugh. Like, I'll joke with I joke with people all the time when like we talk about Sonic games, and like people always go like, "Why does no one ever talk about Sonic Colors or the game that came after it?" And I'm always like, probably because they're good, and therefore there's nothing interesting to say.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, like those are the ones you like. Colors and Generations are the ones you bring up when you're like, oh, but 3D Sonic can be good.
mm-hmm. That is 100% a fact.
Yeah, but
And
who knows? Maybe when I'm done with the game I'm currently playing, maybe I'll pop in Colors and play through it again. Because I have shown the game to my son, and because he likes Sonic as well,
mhm.
and he really likes Colors. Colors, I think, is the one. His favorite is Mania, of course.
Well, yeah.
But he really likes Colors. Like, there's so many times where he's like, "Dad, let's play Colors," and then we'll pop in Colors, and I think he just loves looking at the game.
It is a beautiful game.
It
like,
is gorgeous.
The
like
fact that it's a Wii game still amazes me.
yeah, like it's one of the few Sonic games that, if they had like those like disc plates,
Mhm.
like the sort of metal ones, if they had one for like Colors, like I would put it up because it's just like that's art I want on my wall because it looks really cool.
It is. It is a great game. Like I
See,
still
now I want to
defend-
play Colors. God dang it!
and I kind of do too.
I kind of want to play it now.
And thankfully, it has a way to play it on modern consoles, unlike
Yes.
the next game, which only has a
Yeah.
PC port.
Yeah, when they announced they were porting Colors to modern consoles, I was excited. I was because I was like, I don't want to hunt down a Wii copy of this game, and now I have it on my Xbox, and I'm a happy man.
Totally. So, Generations.
The famous Sonic Generations.
So everyone made jokes about the 15th anniversary being the saddest anniversary in video game history.
Yeah.
For a franchise. Sonic's 20th anniversary, on the other hand, oh my god, they made up for it in every way possible.
Yes. Sonic Generations is
a love letter to the fans in every way.
And is like a top 5 Sonic game of all time.
It really is. Everything about Generations to me is perfect. Other than maybe like a level or two that I don't think are as good as others, and the final boss is kind of meh.
My biggest issue with Generations, and it's weird to complain about this because of what the game is, but it is such a member berry game that it does bug me a little bit.
Ironically, though, I think the game after Generations hugs nostalgia more than Generations did.
If it's the one I think you're thinking of, for sure. But I think Generations makes up for all the member berry stuff by being a very, very competently well-made video game.
That and the whole point of Generations is supposed to be it's a celebration.
Yeah. And what I like is they don't just do the 2D stuff. They go all the way from like 1 to Colors, basically.
Oh yeah. Like
everything gets, even 06 shows up.
And it's one of the funnest levels in the game.
Yeah, because the whole because in 06, I liked those stages where it was like the city on fire and you're trying to escape it or whatever. I liked those, where I liked the concept of them, but Generations improves upon them in every way.
So one of my favorite things about the Generations was the whole idea of doing like the 2D levels you play as classic Sonic and then the 3D interpretations that you do later on. Like there's just something about like when I saw the first clip of Green Hill in 3D, I was like, my mind was blown because I was like, this is like the coolest thing Sega has done in years.
Yeah, and it's weird that like they hadn't overused Green Hill at this point somehow.
Yeah, I mean, like the last time it really appeared in a 3D game was the, I guess, Heroes, like Seaside. Well, kind of.
Well, Seaside Hill's in this game too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. I mean, the last time I guess Green Hill itself appeared was that bonus stage in Adventure 2, which isn't fun to play at all. But
no.
But yeah, like Green Hill, like so the level choices in this game were a little interesting to me because I think some of them were questionable, others not so much.
Yeah.
There was a bit few too many city levels.
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, like Sonic 1, of course it was going to be Green Hill. Like what else would it be?
And Sonic 2, of course, was going to be Chemical Plant.
So I would have argued possibly like I'm trying to think like there was other levels in Sonic 2 that I would have liked as well, but I guess Chemical Plant did make the most sense.
It's the iconic one. Like, it has the amazing song. Like, that's one of the best Sonic
Yep.
songs ever.
And I love what they
And-
do with it in like the 3D version.
Yeah. Ooh, it's so good. And then it's a shame they don't have anything for Sonic 3. They do Sky Sanctuary for Knuckles.
Because they count them as one game. Yeah.
Yeah. Which,
And I mean,
you know,
I love Sky Sanctuary as like a level.
yeah.
Especially because they fully flesh it out and make it an actual stage, not just a one-off like it was in the original game.
Yeah, but in the original game, it was meant to be sort of like the story, like kind of climactic moment, I think. But with Sonic 3, I would have liked, or if they had done something with Sonic 3, they could have done like Casino Night Zone or something.
Well, they kind of did Casino Night because they did that pinball DLC thing that you can't get anymore.
See, I didn't play that, so
Yeah,
because I didn't get to Generations till quite a few years later.
Well,
I think by the time this game came out, my 360 had red ringed and was dead, and I didn't borrow a friend's PS3 until a couple years after this.
Yep.
And actually, that's when I first played through Generations, was on my friend's PS3, and now I have a copy of it on my 360. So
yep, that and I think Generations 3DS actually had Carnival Night. No, not Carnival Night. Casino Night.
Casino Night from 2, yeah.
Yep.
I was thinking Carnival Night from 3.
Carnival Night. Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking Carnival Night. But yeah, it's weird how like Generations, yeah, is a love letter, and yet it's done really well. It has all the history, the whole classic modern Sonic thing, which seemed kind of weird, but yet they made it work.
See, my favorite thing was they hyped it up as like they did the 3 eras. They did the classic era. They did the Dreamcast era, even though Heroes isn't a Dreamcast game. But I guess it
Close
kind
enough.
of it fits with the aesthetic. And then they did the modern era.
Yeah, and they're all like very well represented. Like the classic 2D stuff with like Pudgy Sonic doesn't feel bad. Like it's the best 2D Sonic in a 3D Sonic game.
Yeah, like
bar none. It still feels iffy, but
yeah,
it's not terrible.
His controls aren't amazing, but for what they are, they're fine.
Yeah,
they're fun. They're fun enough.
Yeah, but I much prefer the modern Sonic stuff.
Oh yeah, like Sonic and actually, have you ever played the ROM hacks where they put classic Sonic into the 3D stages?
I have not.
It's entertaining. It doesn't work very well, but it's entertaining.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And I never played the 3DS version of this, so I don't know how different it is in comparison.
The 2D, the classic Sonic levels play basically the same, and the 3D Sonic levels are just like Rush style.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, it's not as... There's some interesting level ideas because they did like... they did the shadow level from Adventure 2 that you start out with. I forget the name of it. They did Mushroom Hill Zone actually for 3.
See, I like Mushroom Hill.
Yeah, they actually picked some pretty cool choices for the different stages. Like Sonic 2 was Casino Night.
Yeah.
I believe they did the opening stage for Adventure 1.
Oh, what? Emerald Coast?
Emerald Coast. Yep, they did that one.
Okay.
They did a Rush level, I think.
That's not a bad idea.
Well, that was the big missed opportunity, like because they only did one handheld level in the handheld version.
Yeah, they should have done like the Adventure trilogy.
Oh yeah, well they didn't do an advanced stage at all, and everyone was like, the biggest thing people were pissed about was they didn't do Bridge Zone from the original Sonic 8-bit game because everyone loves Bridge Zone for whatever reason.
Nah, it's okay.
It's got a catchy song.
It does, yes. But I feel with the 3DS version of Generations, they weren't going to go all out with like the handheld side.
Yeah.
So
Generations 3DS is okay at best. Like I beat it in a sitting because it's that easy.
Yeah, it's largely forgotten and probably for the best.
Yeah.
Because the console version stands up very strong.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the Dreamcast era trailer where they literally just started it off with City Escape and everyone was like, well, that was the most unsurprising thing ever.
That sounds about right.
And they actually got Ted Poley and Tony Harnell back to re-record their lines for the song, like both the classic and the modern versions. And I love how they made the classic City Escape is one of the greatest things ever, by the way.
Oh yeah,
with the truck is like a freaking nightmare with like trying to run Sonic
yeah.
down.
It's so good.
Yep. Generations was a very awesome game, even if I think the final boss kind of sucks.
Yeah, the final boss is pretty iffy.
And honestly, like the worst part about Generations was the fact that I just don't think they've ever really hit that peak again.
They've come close, in my opinion,
They have,
but for a different reason.
unfortunately, the next game that they released is one of the weirdest Sonic games I think ever made. With Sonic,
Yeah,
weirdest and most forgettable Sonic games ever made. In the case of
mhm.
Sonic Lost World,
But it's a shame that like Generations hasn't gotten that like modern bump. You're surprised, like I'm surprised it hasn't, like they didn't make like a native PS4, Xbox
yeah,
One version for it, or that it's not even on Switch.
yeah.
Like it would probably do really well.
I mean, theoretically, I guess you can play it on Steam Deck because it's on Steam.
Yeah, and it's backwards compatible
That's true.
on Xbox, which love that. And
Yeah.
I've played it on my Series X. It's very good. Very
Yeah.
happy.
I'm a Sony boy, so I have to just deal with what I got to deal with.
And
But
and the worst thing is that like Sony could do backwards compatibility with like PS3 games if they wanted to. They just don't want to do it.
it would take a lot of work and
I
money
know,
that
but
they don't want to spend.
yeah, but it's like they definitely have the resources to do it.
Oh yeah,
if they
totally.
really wanted to. But oh well.
So,
So,
Lost
speaking
World,
of games that are stuck on platforms,
Lost World's on PC, I think.
yeah, but
Um,
again, this is a game I think it should be brought to
yeah.
PlayStation, Xbox. Like, why not?
So I was joking earlier about how like ironically the nostalgia game. This game, I swear, hugs nostalgia more than Generations did.
See, to me, Sonic Lost World. I haven't played Lost World because again, I didn't have a Wii U. But to me, the level design looked like it was trying to copy Galaxy.
It kind of was. A lot of people thought it was ripping off Extreme 2, which I thought was like they're tubes. It's not the same thing, but
Yeah,
I thought people were just making a stretch. They were making a stretch just for the sake of Sonic.
yeah. I
Um,
think sometimes people go out of their way to criticize Sonic.
Lost World is like probably out of all the Sonic games I've played, like it has got to be the most mid Sonic game I think I've ever played.
It's not the most mid I've played, but again, I haven't played this one.
Yeah, this one it's like it has some interesting ideas.
I love the look of it.
It's a beautiful looking game. Like it looks amazing. The gameplay is just so average, like because
Mhm.
they tried to do this parkour thing, which was kind of cool, but it's not for perfectly programmed, and the levels are all kind of the level designs aren't amazing either. Like they have some good ideas, but others aren't as great as they could be. And
Yeah.
the story's really dumb because it's like they're at this point they were just really trying to like stretch the whole we have to have Eggman be the villain thing, but we want to make it somewhat unpredictable. But in the way they did it, it just kind of becomes more predictable.
Yeah.
It's just one of those games where there's not a lot to say about it because it's just so eh.
Yeah, 'cause it looks like they were trying to do something different.
I think that's the key. They tried something different. Unfortunately, they did it at the worst time to do that because they had just perfected classics. They had just perfected 3D Sonic, and
Yeah,
they immediately changed it.
like Generations gameplay with this Lost World aesthetic would be awesome.
Yeah,
Because I'm looking at the screenshots of it on Steam, and it's just like I love how bright and colorful it is. You know, that sort of cartoony vibe. Like it looks really good.
it is a great looking game. It was so just boring to play. That was like the problem.
Which is a shame.
And it because of that, I think that's why it's such a forgettable thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like, really, I have nothing more to say about it because it's just that average.
Yeah, I know some people kind of like were not kind to it in some reviews I've seen, but
It was stuck on the Wii U because it was part of that stupid Nintendo exclusivity deal that Sega got stuck in.
is that like the Bayonetta 2 situation as well?
Not quite. It was more Sega signed a 3-game deal with just for Sonic, like not them themselves.
Mm-hmm.
and it was basically like they basically promised Nintendo 3 exclusive Sonic games for the Wii U,
Okay.
which ended up being Sonic Lost World, one of the stupid Olympics games, and then Sonic Boom. Do we even want to talk about Boom? Because that's kind of its own thing.
Sonic Boom is somehow worse than Sonic 06. There you go.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't.
in some ways.
Yeah, it's wow.
It's almost like it was designed for a console that wasn't the Wii U, and trying to put it on the Wii U was a bad idea.
But I don't think if it was on another console, it would have helped.
No, probably not. I will say though that the original trailer for it looked really awesome.
Yeah, and I've heard the two 3DS games that are like sequels to it aren't nearly as bad.
Oh no, so Shattered Crystal is decent. The problem with that one is they tried to make it a Metroidvania and the levels are too big.
Mm.
Fire and Ice though is a legitimately good game because it's like just linear levels and they're fun to play through.
It's almost as if there's like a pattern here, Sega. You know?
Yeah, but Boom is like that hilarious like dirty little secret that Sega doesn't want to remember.
Yeah, because I've never even watched the TV show.
Well, I mean that was the best thing to come out of it.
Yeah, I've heard people like it, but
it's modern humor, so I don't like it because it makes me feel stupid watching it. But
yeah, and it's just like I'm so bad at like keeping up with TV shows. I just
Yeah.
don't bother anymore.
yeah, yeah, that's really all. I don't really have much to say about Boom though, other than
It's bad. Don't
they-
play it. Move on.
they really wanted to make a Jack and Daxter game, and they instead made Boom. That's how I always saw it.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
But moving on now, back to actual Sonic games. Sonic Forces. This is the most fascinating Sonic game I think ever made.
Sonic Forces. Sonic Forces.
Because it's like, it's not inherently bad, but it's also not good.
Yeah, like I remember. I'm sure you remember as well. Back in 2017, they gave us that full like gameplay trailer for Sonic Mania, right?
Yep.
And we all were like, "Holy shit, this looks incredible!" We all lost it over Mania.
Yep.
And then they teased what would become Sonic Forces, and the way they teased it was like, "This is Generations 2."
Yeah, because they hyped it up as like the same developers as Generations and Colors, and they deliberately ignored the fact that most of these people actually worked on Lost World. But
Yeah, and they also like they showcased classic Sonic with modern Sonic again.
which annoyed
Project
everybody.
Sonic 2017.
Yeah, because it's funny because that annoyed everybody because everyone's like, "Oh, they're doing this again."
I mean, to me, when I heard they were doing Generations 2, I was like, well, I like Generations 1, so I'm on board. Like, we're gonna get a classic 2D Sonic game and then a follow-up to them finally figuring out 3D Sonic. Like, let's do it.
See,
And then-
I was a bit more skeptical just because of the setting that they were showing with like the freaking post-apocalyptic shit going on in the background.
See, I wasn't against that because I think Sonic could make that work.
They can. I just didn't have faith in Sega, well, Sonic Team to do it.
See, they had restored some faith with Generations for me. So I was like, all right, But I get kind of caught in that Sonic cycle. Like whenever they announce a new one, I'm like, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens.
See, I'm always like skeptical with every new Sonic game, where I'm always
That's
kind of like,
fair.
it could be good. I'm gonna buy it regardless, but I'm not gonna like get hyped for it either.
That's fair. I understand. But Sonic holds such a special place in my heart. I always
fair.
give him a chance.
The last Sonic game I got super hyped for was like Lost World, and it was a disappointment to me. So I kind of have been I've kind of learned not to get hyped for them anymore, just because it's usually, ironically, in the case of Forces, not getting hyped for it probably helped my opinion on it.
Yeah, because I know with Forces, I didn't get it immediately when it came out. I got Mania instead because everyone was praising Mania to help. And
okay.
love Mania still to this day.
I take that back because I was hyped for Mania.
Yeah, Mania was something special.
Yeah.
That I don't think will ever be repeated, sadly. But Forces, it didn't hit. It really didn't hit. Like, it sold decent, I guess. But this thing with Sonic games, you look at the sales figures, they're all like, for the most part, fine.
Yeah. So the thing about Forces that I've always been bothered by was like people act like it's just as bad as like '06, and I'm always like, it's not. It's fine.
Like it, in some ways, I almost think it's worse because of just how dull it is. Because
It,
like
it's
06 is such a spectacular bad that it's kind of amazing. But Forces, it's like you play through it, you beat it in like 5 hours, and then you're like, that's it. Like
yeah.
that was kind of lame.
Well, the problem with Forces is like it has very good gameplay, like inherently.
Yeah.
Like the gameplay is fine. It's
Yeah, it's fine.
boost formula Sonic. The custom character is super addicting and actually a really good idea that I'm actually surprised considering how many jokes there were around it.
What worried me about it was that they were sort of embracing the whole like Sonic fandom with the Avatar creator.
The weird part of the fan base,
Yes. Which I mean, Sega has gotten closer to that weird side of the fan base, which I think is weirdly a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I mean they're dedicated, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean Sega's always been, I think, more open and responsive to the fan communities than say a Nintendo has.
Yeah. So actually going into the character creator though, it's fine. Like they actually handled it very well.
Yeah, it's just my issue with it is I didn't want to play as a created character. I wanted to play as Sonic, damn it.
True.
It's called Sonic Forces.
Yeah. To be fair though, it's pretty half and half, and a lot of times when you play as the created character, Sonic is usually present anyways, so you can kind of swap between them.
Yeah, for sure. But Forces just feels like almost like a Sonic game on autopilot. The only weird thing about it is the created character. Other than that, it's kind of what you expect.
The levels are extremely safe. Like that is the biggest problem I have with it.
It takes like the least amount of chances I've ever seen a Sonic game take, which almost gave me whiplash. That I'm like, there's no weird thing about this one.
I like the idea of the story though, where it's like Eggman took over the world.
Yeah,
that was interesting to me, especially because Sonic isn't there right away. Like he's actually kidnapped at the start.
Yeah, which I thought was a neat idea. But yeah, in a lot of ways, it felt like a disappointment, and that they almost kind of half-assed this one. Like I think it could have been better.
Oh no, it definitely could have. Like
because as I was playing it, I was just like thinking like they'd done Generations, man. Like Generations was handled so well, even Colors.
So fun fact,
I think handled better, but Forces is so forgettable.
Fun fact, they hyped it up as like the same team that made Sonic Generations and Colors, but in reality, if you actually look at the team members, most of those people aren't the same people. It's actually mostly people who did Lost World who worked on this game.
Would you say this is better than Lost World?
Yes, in the fact that I didn't get bored.
That helps. I mean, I was kind of bored playing this game, and was just kind of wanting to get it over with. And then I beat it in one sitting.
Yeah, same.
And then when I was done, I uninstalled it, and I was like, "Well, that was Sonic Forces."
I beat this game twice because I bought it on the PS4 day one, beat it in a sitting. It was kind of like, it was fine, and I just moved on.
You're like, I paid $60 for this,
and then I got it as a gift for Switch because they didn't know I already had it, and I wasn't going to return it, so I played it again on the Switch.
See, when I had it on Switch, I got the combo cart of this and what was it, Super Monkey Ball, Banana Blitz HD.
Yep.
And so that's like two of the most meh games I've ever played on one cart. So
yeah, but then I'll give Sonic Team credit after Forces, because Forces was 2017, right?
Yes.
They actually did something that I was shocked by, and they actually took a break.
Yeah, I think Sega finally realized constantly putting Sonic games out was just biting them in the ass.
Yeah.
And they needed to
actually put some thought into one for once.
Yes, for sure.
Which, I guess, to transition into the last current, most recent 3D Sonic game.
The most recent Sonic game, Sonic Frontiers. In fact, funnily enough with this game, um, the day it came out, I actually went to a funeral for a coworker of mine who had passed away, and I was all dressed up in my suit and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and so went through that whole thing, that whole process, and then at the end when I was driving home, I was like, "Oh wait, Sonic Frontiers came out today. Let me go get it."
Yeah.
And so I remember walking into the GameStop of the mall that was by where the funeral home was, still in my suit, like looking sharp and spiffy, and grabbed a copy of Sonic Frontiers on the Xbox and brought it up and bought it. And so there's potential that a GameStop employee thought I dressed up just to
Just to
buy the
get.
new Sonic game.
Yeah.
And I kind of hope he thinks that.
So that's pretty funny. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
My story was a little different because I actually had to go to like 3 GameStops just because I couldn't. They didn't have a fucking PS5 copy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I went to 2 and they were like, we have it on everything but PS5, and I was like, damn it. I'm like, what the hell? So I ended up going to like 3 until I found one that had a PS5 copy.
Yeah. I mean, you
Just
could have got the PS4 version and upgraded the PS5 version.
yeah, but I'm a crazy collector, so
That's fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, you bought the PS5. You want to buy the copy that says
yep.
PS5 on it. I get it.
I wanted to sit on my PS5 shelf.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, yeah. Anyway, Sonic Frontiers.
The way I'll sum Frontiers up, because I don't want to talk too much about Frontiers just because it is still fairly new. But
Yeah. Came out in November.
Yep. I will say though, like the best way I sum this game up is monumental step in the right direction, but it is still not quite where it needs to be.
I would agree. I actually would like to go back to this game at some point because I know they've said like, oh, we're gonna do like a bunch of DLC for it.
I think the first one's coming out fairly soon, or it is already out.
Well, one of them is like story DLC, and that's when I'll like pop it in and play it again.
Mm.
But I'm curious to if they've smoothed out some of the technical issues.
I hope so because like this, honestly, the technical difficulties weren't they didn't ruin the experience for me, but they were noticeable.
Like the pop in was really bad.
There was just, well, I mean, open world first attempt at an open world game. I'll give him a little leeway there. Like
yeah, like Sonic. This is Sonic Breath of the Wild essentially.
Yeah,
and it's handled way better than I think anybody ever expected it to. Because I remember when they first, like, we first got the teaser for it, and it's like, oh, what could this be? And then the name of it, I think, got leaked. It's like Sonic Frontiers, and then they're like, oh yeah, this is like open zone. That's what they used, the term open zone. I was skeptical, but I was like, I think they could make it work because there have been so many like 3D like fan games of Sonic where they literally just give them a big area to run around in.
Yeah.
So maybe this was Sonic Team taking some influence from that, saying, maybe we could try that. And I liked that it had like a fresh art style. It was trying to separate itself from the previous games. Has a little bit more of a realistic edge, but not too much.
And they brought the comic writer Ian Flynn in to write the story, which I thought was a nice touch.
And it's not heavy nostalgia based at all. Like there's callbacks to the other games, but it's not overdone at all. And my time with it, I really enjoyed it. It's not a perfect game by any means.
Not by any means. They definitely have a lot to work. They have a lot of work to do for the future.
Yeah, like the 2D segments are somehow worse. I don't know. I don't know how that happened because they figured it out in Generations.
They need to just
awful.
They gotta just drop the 2D at this point, and like because
I wish they would.
We're getting a new 2D Sonic game that actually looks promising.
Yeah,
hopefully they'll stick to that. They'll do their 2D in the 2D space, and they'll just go back to full 3D.
I think that would be the way to go. I think that would be a smart choice of them because the 3D parts are really good. And I was surprised at how much I enjoyed running around these open zones as Sonic. It worked, like you'd run around, you'd find like a rail, you'd grind on it, get a couple things, and then jump off and keep going. Like it somehow worked.
Like to me, like I laughed when like the biggest complaints people had with this game was, see, you can tell like they're desperate to complain about things when like their biggest complaint was that the open world areas were lifeless, which
Yeah,
my response was like, so were Breath of the Wilds.
but that's different.
And so were like the recent Assassin Creeds. Like open world games have been lifeless for a while now. It's like
To
it,
me, with like Sonic, it's like the whole point of a Sonic game isn't that like there's like all this like with like an open zone, like the whole point of the game is to, you really, they give you this giant like sandbox to run around and be Sonic in.
mm,
And I don't know what people necessarily meant by lifeless. Like did they just want like flashing lights everywhere? Like
I don't.
I just think some people in their ADHD riddled brains feel like they need constant stimulation when they're
They,
playing a game,
the
especially something like a
yeah,
Sonic game. But Frontiers, I think, handles atmosphere like really, really well. And there were never points where I felt it was lifeless or that I was bored. There was always something to do.
mm.
And even if it was like on the other side of the zone with Sonic, you can just zip right over there, you know?
This is see like to me, it's just a inherent problem with an open world game. Is it's very hard to make the entire every moment like feel fleshed out.
Yeah,
Which I mean, it's like how many open world games actually like achieve like making something happen at all times?
for
Not
sure. For
not a
sure.
lot do. And I thought
Yeah.
Frontiers did a serviceable job. I still
Yeah.
think it definitely has a lot it can improve on, but
Yeah, like a lot of the cyberspace stuff,
yeah,
which tried to give you that traditional Sonic thing, I thought were okay, but they were definitely like B sides from Generations as far as like levels were considered.
yeah.
Um,
To me, I think Sega's Sonic Team's biggest problem is they're like afraid to fully commit to something,
yeah,
and I think they need to just get it over with, and just commit.
yeah, for sure. But I think Frontiers, I think they've said that this is going forward. This is what they're doing.
Well, as long as they refine it and don't like immediately give up on it the second they figure it out, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah,
And I
because
think
I think it might have been an interview with uh, Izuka, where or somebody on the team where they were like, like Frontiers is the foundation for the future, essentially. Where like the next game is essentially going to be Frontiers 2. That they're going to take the open world style that they've done with this, kind of, figure out what works, what doesn't, refine what they can. Because I'm thinking if they do a Frontiers 2 and it improves a lot of stuff from Frontiers, like I think you have a classic Sonic game on your hands.
yeah,
Like a great game on your hands.
again, probably the
'Cause
best since Generations.
yeah, because when I was playing Frontiers, like there were moments where I'm like, this is fantastic. This is like a great Sonic game. And then there were other points where it just like I was like, ugh, come on. Where it's
You got
like
both
you did it
sides.
again, Sonic Team. You know?
It was like the whole "you're so close," but
Yes. Yes. And I think they are very close to getting it right with this one. Like finding a right balance of like new stuff, old stuff, actually having a well written story and characters without it being too goofy or too edgy, um, perfectly balancing new ideas with nostalgia grabs. There's a lot that it does right.
if they can do what they did with going from say Unleashed to Colors, where they listen to what the fans want and actually like builds a game based around the things that people liked from the previous ones, I think we might have like one of the best Sonic games ever made.
Yeah, like, and I think we could be in the beginning of like the Frontiers era, where we
Mm.
get like a couple of these games going
This-
forward, and then maybe they'll go back to a more linear style after that. But
well, I mean, at this point though, we can have like these new open-ended Sonic games, and then like if this new 2D Sonic game does well, then they can just use that as the 2D formula
yeah,
going
and I
forward.
think that would actually be smart. Like have your 2D style for the Sonic for that style, and then do Frontiers for the 3D style.
Mm.
And so you can kind of have everything going. It's like it's almost kind of what Nintendo's doing with Mario, where they haven't completely given up on 2D Mario, but 2D Mario and 3D Mario are definitely their own different
Yeah.
vibes.
I mean, 2D Mario. I always say with 2D Mario, I haven't been excited for a 2D Mario game since New Super Mario Brothers Wii.
I mean, Wonder looks cool.
It does. I have some hope for that, but I mean, like, I still think Super Mario Odyssey is a perfect game. So,
Oh God, yeah, Odyssey is amazing.
and I really want the next 3D. I'm worried about the next 3D Mario game because I just don't think they're gonna top Odyssey.
I'm not worried about it at all.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
The 3D Marios have quite the track record, so I'm not worried at all.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if Bowser's Fury is anything to go by, if the next 3D Mario is a mixture of Bowser's Fury and Odyssey, I'm over the hill.
I think we'll be in good hands.
It will be just fine.
Yep.
I never have to worry about Nintendo making good games.
That is true.
Unlike Sonic Team.
Yeah.
But I liked Frontiers. I really enjoyed it. When I was done with it, I felt pleased. I was like, it wasn't perfect, but I had quite a solid time with it. I feel good about the future of Sonic.
I think
For the first time in a long time.
Yeah. I think this is the first time where the majority of people have really felt good about Sonic in a long time.
Yeah, like it kind of got mixed reviews, you know, like
I mean, Sonic,
like high 60s, mid 70s, but
I mean that's an A, for considering how like critics treat Sonic, that's an A+, honestly.
Yeah, like I know some people were kind of harsh to it, but for me, I'm like, no, I really enjoyed it. So, and I think if Superstars, when that comes out this year, which they haven't given the release date for that yet.
I actually like that because I prefer them to work on it and release it when it's done.
Well, well, they did say this year, and I'm pretty sure it will be coming this year. I think the rumor is that it's going to come out like 3 days before Mario Wonder, the new Mario game, which is like, guys, that's a bad time. Don't do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully they'll rethink that.
If they push it to like November, I'll be happy.
Yeah,
but we shall see on that.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we've covered 3D Sonic. We might have to reconvene at some point and talk about the spin-offs at some point.
Oh God,
in the future. I mean, we could probably do an entire episode about Chronicles alone, but
don't. Oh God.
But it is. We've just hit 3 hours. We completely obliterated my 2-hour limit, but that's fine.
I mean, if we've learned anything, 3D Sonic is a roller coaster, and whether you like it or not, you have to get on that ride and just go, man.
Yep.
So.
All right. Well,
yeah, when we started doing this, it was daylight out.
Yeah, well, now there's a flash flood warning happening over in Connecticut right now.
Oh hell yeah!
But yeah. So I know you last time you didn't really have anything major to plug. Did you have anything you want to plug this time, or?
Well, it might depend on when this comes out, but I am scheduled to do a Tales of the Backlog episode with Dave.
Oh, nice.
On the game Wario World.
Oh, cool.
So I'm done with it. I've done my notes. We're scheduled to record it at the time of this recording in a couple weeks. But I know that won't be coming out till like September-ish.
So probably, yeah, this will be out later this month. So
okay. Well, people can look forward to that in the future. And I'm working on a game right now for Rick with Pixel Perfect, but that's not coming out till way later, probably like at the end of the year.
I have a game I'm working on with Rick as well, but who knows when that'll be.
Yeah, because he wanted to do the game that I'm doing with him. He wanted to do it in September, and I told him, I'm like, I would have, but Starfield comes out in September.
Yep.
And I'm afraid that's going to take up all my time. So I was like, do you mind if I just like start it now, and then like we'll finish it when we finish it, and then we can just record it, and then when it's done, you can just put it up whenever you want. And he's like, that's fine.
Yeah, Rick's really good about working with that.
Yeah, Rick's very cool with that. So,
but yeah, and I guess a little sneak peek. I do have another podcast. It's been on hiatus for a while. It's called the 3DO Experience, and it might be coming back sooner than later. And there might be someone in this episode that will be joining me for that.
So is there somebody else in this thing I don't know about?
Yeah, maybe. Stay tuned for that, guys. The 3DO Experience will be coming back hopefully this month.
Yeah, I've been kind of bugging him about it.
I mean, I've needed someone to kick me in the ass to bring it back, so this will work out perfectly.
Oh yeah.
But until then, guys, this has been Bill Unfortunately, Alex wasn't here for this one, but she'll be back next week. And until next time, guys, we will see you all later. You can find the Gaming Collecting Podcast on all your major podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, whatever. Follow Linktree/Barber Games, and follow us on the Discord. It's a crazy place.
Oh, yeah.
And with that, we'll see you all next time.
Bye-bye.